You're listening to the MycoGeeky podcast.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the MycoGeeky podcast, the podcast that goes deep so you can level up your at-home mycology game, mushroom cultivation game, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. It's about to be the 4th of July. We're just celebrating our independence. I was, just contemplating earlier today. We're lucky. We're very blessed to know about this medicine, to know about these fruits, to enjoy the process of learning about, studying, cultivating, enjoying, appreciating mushrooms. So, yeah, I'm digging it. So recently, we had a lot of rain here in northeastern Ohio, and man, my front yard is just popping with mushrooms. Now, my wife's been out of town, so I have not been on any like little forays or forage expeditions, but I didn't have to because my front yard just got them popping up left and right. I think I'm up to like 7 or 8, maybe 10 different species, literally in my front yard. So that's been fun. My kids have been having a blast seeing what's popping up. I'm, getting some fruit dried out to 𝐥𝐤𝐤. He's doing, a lot of DNA sequencing of mushrooms right now and identification. So that'll be fun. I've been tagging some stuff in iNaturalist, just doing the things. And so I've been really having a good time. Boy, it feels good when the mushrooms are out and popping. It was dry for a while, so it's the rain is welcome. Anyway, hopefully not tomorrow night. Hopefully we get to see some fireworks. But anyway, yeah, it was good. My buddy Aaron Hilliard over at Mushroom Wonderland, he sent me a little picture saying, "Hey man, I was out, doing some foraging and was wearing your camo ghost shirt. So shout out to him. I think his most recent videos got a little shout out to me. He wears the rainbow, or actually camo ghost, sorry, shirt in the video. Very cool. Really appreciate it. Love the love. Gotta love the love." Also, coming up next week, we're going to check in. She's not my main guest, but we're going to check in and chit chat for a little bit with Lauren Ferenga of Hippie and a Vet. And she, went to DC recently and got a chance to rub shoulders and try to impress some Congress people about the power of psilocybin and entheogens, and why it's important to decriminalize, legalize, whatever we do, but just, make it more accessible for people. So we'll be checking in with her next week. That'll be fun. Main guest to be determined. Got a lot of people slotted in, just trying to figure out who's going to be the one next week. We shall see. But tonight, this is one I've been waiting for. Got a very special guest. Of course, first, got to thank the mods in the Discord. Got to thank my Patreon supporters. Hey guys, if you watch this show on a regular basis and you enjoy it and you get something out of it and it's affected your cultivation practice, please consider supporting me on Patreon. If you can support me for 1 month, great. If you can support me for 2 months, great. If you can support me for the next 5 years, fantastic. Whatever you're capable of doing or able to do, I really appreciate it. If you don't, that's fine too. Keep watching the show though. I appreciate it. Anyway, so my Patreon is MycoGeeky. Real simple. If you're on an app, you got to actually Google it and then go through the Google link to find it. Otherwise, it's not searchable because it's considered an adult channel. Not the usual Patreon adult channel, of course. Anyway, so yeah, thank you very much. Love my Patreon supporters. Every week I get some new ones. I get to connect with you guys. You guys have given me great ideas, so I really appreciate it. So tonight's guest, settling in here, getting ready to do it. This was one of my first vendor experiences, not, genetics, but just vending mycology supplies. And I could not have possibly been more impressed. I'm going to show you just how impressed I was here. I couldn't have been more impressed with this guy. His stuff was just flawless. and the packaging was impeccable. Everything about it said I'm dealing with a professional. I'm getting quality. I'm not going to be disappointed. This is going to be good. So I'm talking about old Tim of Tip of the Cat Mushrooms. Yes, we finally got him, guys. You guys had been bugging me about getting him on, and I had been bugging him about getting on, and we finally made it happen. I'm going to show you guys, spur of the moment idea here. Might not have been a good one, but we'll see. Trying to find a picture of one of the very, I wouldn't say it's the first, but it was one of my very early plates. And it's just a sexy plate, man. I bought a 4-well plate from him, or I don't know, 20 or 30, something like that. And I got a chance to, grow on different media right away because of the 4 wells. They were preloaded with, potato dextrose, malt, fungal, something or other. I can't remember all of them. But anyway, let me just show you this picture here. There you go. Those are flawless. Those are clean. Those are really nice. So, of course, I was like, this guy knows what he's doing. I'm going to talk to this guy. And he was willing to talk. So I learned a lot from him right off the bat, and really just have never stopped being impressed with him and what he brings to the table, and his contribution to the mycology community that I'm a part of, that all you guys are now a part of, or have been a part of for a very long time. And so how about this? Without further ado, let's welcome to the show Tim of Tip of the Cat Mushrooms. All right, what's up, Tim? How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, MycoGeeky.
Hey, man. Well, so you are just one of a tiny, tiny handful of people that I've ever actually met in real life. And that was back during Spread the Spores in Detroit, Michigan. And that was a very interesting event. We did get a fair amount of time to chit chat. I definitely got along with you. Prior to that, I had made several purchases from you when I was just getting going in my whole mycology journey, and just thought a lot of you. And as many people who are longtime watchers of the show know, I have been begging to have you on for a very long time. So here we are. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I'm glad I finally got a chance to get on here. I've been really, really busy. Things have kind of slowed down a little bit recently, so I definitely have a chance to do this. So I'm happy to do it.
Well, I don't want to say I'm glad things are a little slow for you right now, but I might be just a little bit glad. So after the show, that might change. We'll see. Anyway, thanks for being here. Let's get right into it. Like we do with every guest, got to hear the Myco origin story. So the earliest mushroom memory, what moved you in the direction of mushrooms?
Well, I mean, probably the earliest mushroom memory is the same as most people as a kid, running around the yard and kicking them and dust balls going up in the air. But for me, I was, in college planning on doing an engineering degree. And so for the summer, I had a DOT internship with North Carolina, where I was out going to a bunch of different job sites and just like traveling all over these backcountry roads to get to these different places. We're doing paving jobs or inspecting roads. And so I started noticing, these mushrooms. And as soon as I started noticing them and talking about them, all the other guys like, oh, well, I saw this mushroom over here. I saw this. So like everybody, as soon as they get that little taste and that peek behind the curtain, it's like a community thing. And then like everybody, knows you're interested in, so they all direct you to it.
Uh,
So I was picking, down there where I was in Eastern North Carolina. Um, there's a lot of white-bellied chicken of the woods, which is Rhedoporus cincinnatus. And so I probably had 20 different locations, within 50 miles that, regularly put these off 3 or 4 times from the spring to the fall. And so I would post pictures of these and people would buy them online. And I would just ship them out, and then there was other mushrooms, the Amanita muscaria I was taking pictures of, people were interested in. And from there, when I went back to college in the fall, I'd already done 2 years of engineering. And I was like, hey, could I switch to biology? Would that be a problem? And they're like, well, you can do it if you want, but you've already done all of your physics, your maths, your everything I needed for engineering to start taking my advanced courses. So basically, my schedule for the next 2 years was biologies that were required to take and biology electives because I'd already done all of my hard, main courses. So that really made the last 2 years just really, biology focused, and that was really nice. And I mean, the only real reason I was in engineering is, based on my research, 7 out of the top 10 paying bachelor degree jobs is if you have an engineering degree. And it really doesn't matter what type of engineering degree you have. Like you could have civil engineering, end up doing biology. I just need to know that you're able to do those advanced level, concepts.
So this is interesting. I didn't know this about you. So, and I can relate to this. I think I switched my major 3 times, maybe more. And it was for the same reason. It was that struggle between trying to be very pragmatic and practical and, well, what degree should I get versus what am I really excited and interested in? So I can relate to that quite a bit. And that's fascinating. So man, out of the gate, you were selling chicken of the woods. So you're a vendor at your core.
That was probably like the first thing I sold online. And I was like, well, I don't make it, but I don't know if it'll make it, but if you're willing to take that risk, I did a flat rate medium box, put some paper around it and sent it 2 days shipping to Georgia. And she said it came looking great. And she really wanted it because, they didn't have those white bottoms there. They really want to try it. In Eastern North Carolina, I've only had 2 locations where I had the yellow bottom, which is the Laetoporus sulphureus.
That's what we got,
which is really common in some other places, but something about the coastal plain, that white bottom and those older trees in the older neighborhoods really were good at supporting it, the white bottoms.
Interesting. All right, so you switch majors, so now you're a bio major. You get your degree. Bring us and obviously a strong interest. So even during your degree, were you like trying to take mycology courses? Were you when you got a chance to write a paper and pick your topic, like what was that tracked already kind of paved for you?
Like most universities, we had one class where we were doing a lab and the TA, asked the question, so how many of you are in here because you want to go into the human medical field basically? And, 95% of their class is going to raise their hand. So a majority of people are doing these biology courses is because they're, want to do human medical biology type deal. So it's kind of rare. I also didn't do anatomy and physiology. It's like a 5 or 6 credit course. And I went the route of ecology and evolutionary biology, so I didn't need to do those types of courses because I wasn't going to use them. I wasn't interested in doing the healthcare route. To me,
you didn't make a bad choice, Tim. I can tell you right now that you gotta be born wanting to be in this field. It's a pretty rough go. So you dodged a bullet, dude.
Right. And so just like most universities too, they're like, oh, well, we had a mycologist here, 5 years ago. You just missed him. Transferred out to another place where they're trying to grow truffles on pine trees or something.
Right.
And so the lab that I worked in, I was able to do my own, biology elective course where I was able to create my own lab hours. And I did dedicate those lab hours to growing mushrooms on different types of substrates, cloning different wild ones, and doing extractions of the hericium, the wild hericiums I would find. So I was able to integrate that. The lab that I was in, mostly they just played around with E. coli. So,
wait, what? A lab that plays with E. coli? I've never heard of that.
It's popular. They have their little E. coli and their little fridges. And their
oh yeah, I mean, there's got to be 100,000 different versions of E. coli out there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I was using their methods to basically propagate my mycelium. So, I was really big into the orbital incubator shaker because that's what all of them were using. And some people came around and using that a little bit. And you see Paul Stamets' books talk about that. Mycelial fragmentation and fermentation is his fancy name for it. However, if you're doing LCs and you're putting them in syringes, it's a little different because you get these spherical ball spheres that maybe don't look as good for selling LCs online or whatever.
Right. You can put them in boba tea though. I can't wait for the day we have active mycelial ball boba tea. It's gonna be a good day.
Some of those little travel packs, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that'd be great. Cool, man. So, I mean, I knew you had a science background. That's actually more information than I knew. That's very cool, and explains a lot about your very scientific, methodical nature in your plate pouring business. How about we
Yeah, I can tell you about
get
that.
me from there, get me from like that degree to when you formally said, "I'm pouring plates for this community."
So in the lab at the university, I mean, our air wasn't special. It wasn't like our lab had filtered air that was coming in and it was sterile. But everything that we did was pretty much bench work. So like you
Right.
had your stainless steel table, you poured your plates on the bench, you covered up, you came back the next morning and did whatever you want. You might have lost one or two, and that kind of made me biased. Like, well, I could do this at home. And
Right.
so, I take everything at home and I pour at home, pour a stack of plates and sell them, and they're all contaminated. I mean, because it's just the house I was living in, I think was built like 1920. It had like the saggy floors. It was like just dusty and old. I was, right by the river. It was dank, and
A
there's no
fully
way
inoculated house.
there's no way you could get away
Yeah.
with open pouring.
Right.
But based on my experience at the lab, I thought I could for sure. Um, and my also some people talk about you can treat rooms like in your house differently. Like a lot of people use the bathroom, and the reason being they don't have all the furnishing. So I think that's part of the reason why it was so clean in there is like you had a tiled floor, it was a cinder block walls with paint. You don't have a
Right.
couch, curtains, carpet you're walking across, and that's why I try to tell people is like at home, where you got a crack in the window and you see that little sliver of light and you see all that little dust flying through it.
Right.
That's what you have to worry about. You know what I'm saying? All those landing on your plate when you open it. And so like if you have a room in the house at least where you don't have furnishings, you can let it settle down. I mean, you're going to have a lot better chances. So I was looking for a flow hood. eBay, I had found a lot of different options. And at that time, I think it was like 2017, you could actually find them very readily and very cheaply. It wasn't a big deal to get them. Same thing with the autoclaves. So I found this 800-pound flow hood for, $750. It's a Type 2 B2, and it's huge. 6 foot across, 2 foot depth, vertical flow. And so I drove out. I think I went to an auction house that was over by, I think it was by Virginia Tech. Yeah, like Blackstone, like the western part of Virginia, and picked it up, and then came back that night and unloaded at the house. I, I couldn't unload it myself. They loaded with the forks on the truck at the surplus store, and then when I got home, I called a couple buddies. We couldn't push it. It was like three
Yeah.
of us, skinny white boys.
And what did you say it was? 600 pounds?
It's 800 pounds.
800. Oh yeah, I've moved heavy machinery before. You gotta have a machine for that,
Yes.
or you gotta rig something up real fancy.
We called one of my girlfriend's buddies. He's this big Trinidad guy. He's like 6'5", like 300 pounds. I mean, he basically came over and pushed it with one hand across the front of the house. So that's how I got it.
Dude, some of them island boys are huge.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he had no problem.
yeah.
With
South Pacific got some big boys out there. Oh
And
yeah.
we did PVC rollers. I just put PVC rollers
Oh,
under
okay.
the sand, and that just allowed it to go across the floor. And then I spent 2 days, eerily trying to get it up in the air enough, 800 pounds suspended to get the stand back under it. So I've got it like strapped to the wall. At the same time, I got like car jacks under each side, and I'm
Oh my
alternating
God.
between putting cinder blocks to kind of get it teeter totter up until it. So I've moved this thing about 4 or 5 times at this point. So now I got it down. I can do it within, a couple hours. But the first
Nice.
couple times was so sketchy. I was like, if this falls on me, I'm going to be crushed.
So this is the one you do pour in.
Yeah, so this is great for
Okay.
production. It's just got so much space. It's completely enclosed. It's got a sliding glass. So when I'm working, I don't wear a mask. I can, talk or sing or whistle or whatever you want to do and not worry about like it's like a buffet.
Because you got that little, it's got that huge space where the thing comes down. It's very cool.
And because it's Type 2 B2, it's made for working with like things that are pathogens or things that are radioactive. It's got filtered HEPA in, and it also has basically air curtain where it sucks and HEPA filters out.
Oh, I saw it. I saw all the little suction outlets all around it. I was like, oh my God, there's nothing's getting in that little area in there.
And I mean, I didn't need all that. I wouldn't have bought that typically, but it was a good deal. and they said it didn't work. And I downloaded the manual and I looked through it. And basically, it was just a programming thing. If it doesn't sense air being actively pulled out, it won't allow you to turn the fan on. And then once you set that value to 0, it works fine. So it's just a programming thing.
Yeah, man. There's your side business, Tim, is just fixing shit that no one can figure out how to fix. You did that recently with another flow hood, right? That you bought from
Yeah.
Michigan State.
Yep, they do, where they have the filters where basically there's a computer, and once you run that filters for 2,000 or whatever many hours, they don't allow you to turn that flow hood on anymore. They're like, well, you got to buy a new filter and put whatever code is on the filter. And so I can see, based on the computer readout, that flow hood hasn't been used in 10 years. So basically, they ran the filter out, and then they never wanted to replace it. Sat somewhere for 10 years, and they sold it. For I think I got it for $250. So all I did was do a quick search. Hey, anybody got these codes? Yeah, there's a whole forum where a bunch of people are like, here's my code, here's my code.
Wow.
It's not connected to a central base, right? So everybody could go through the same list of codes.
And it didn't matter. Yeah.
And I mean, my filter on my flow hood's 20 years old now. It's going to be fine. You don't need to replace your main filter every 2 years. The important thing is use a good pre-filter and replace the pre-filter when it gets clogged up, and your main filter is going to be fine. The main one I have, this big flow hood, the 800-pound one, I never turn it off. It stays on. It's only been off for like 4 or 5 times this last 5 or 6 years because I was moving it, or maybe the power went out, something like that. But other than that, it runs 24/7, and it has a super efficient motor for that blower, so it doesn't use a bunch of power. It's not loud unless you let the pre-filter get clogged up.
Right.
And I don't know if you've noticed, like the flow hoods too, when you leave them off for a while and you turn them on, they kind of have a weird, like medical, like almost like an ozone smell to them.
They got an odd smell. Yeah,
it's weird. And so when you turn it off and you turn it back up, it's just like the first time I was like, oh, that must be the smell of like the warehouse it was sitting in, but it does that every time.
Yeah, I try to figure out, because I'm always thinking, a lot of people talk about flow hoods and FFUs and laminar flow and how to achieve it. And I try to tell everybody you don't actually need it. If you can get it, that's fantastic. And then we get into talking about, the ratings of these HEPA filters, which is at 0.3, was it 0.2 or 0.3 microns, right? And that's apparently because that point, given the filter media, there's a size that's the hardest for that media to filter. And so they rate it against the hardest size to filter. And so I'm always thinking, like, over time, so let's say you don't always replace your pre-filters at the right time and dust gets in there, all that's ever going to happen really to that HEPA filter is it's not going to get easier for that hardest size particle to get through. It's only going to get harder. So the HEPA filter is never going to, it's only going to filter better. The problem is how to maintain the flow through the filter. So I always tell people, really, you're replacing the pre-filter because there will be a point where the motor that powers the blower in it is not going to be enough to get adequate flow through it. But that's fascinating to hear about yours, because it's old. That thing's old. What is that thing? Minimum 30, 40 years old, right?
The big one?
The big guy.
It has a manufacture date on it, maybe 94, 96, something like that.
Yeah, so like almost 30 years, right? So,
and that main filter's not been replaced.
It's the original filter.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've seen Alan Rockefeller, he was teaching a class, he had the same, he said the same thing to his students, basically. It was like, this investment, if you take care of it, it's going to last you for the entirety of your business or whatever. So it is worth the investment. I mean,
my God, if you bought a new one and you were good with your pre-filter replacement, it would never not work. Just theoretically work literally for the rest of your life.
Yeah. The only problems you'll have is, it warns against putting flame burners in there. You don't want to burn a hole up vertically through it. And I've seen people punch holes in their filters. That's a problem.
Yeah, I work tight to my hood, and I have had a couple times where without thinking, my scalpel has jabbed into the grill. Luckily, it's only ever jabbed, and I've done multiple plate tests afterwards, and the metal part of the grill really does a good job of protecting the filter. But you could do that. But I also had somebody who said they bought one and there was a big tear in one of the pleats, and they said they just put a dab of silicone there and they just didn't work right necessarily in that area, and they've never had any problems. So, yeah.
Yeah, I had another one big one I bought from a warehouse like that had the silicone. They patched it, and I called the company, and they wanted like $2,000 just for the filter, and then plus I had to pay to have it palletized and shipped and all that.
Yeah.
So I got one custom made in China for that size, and it was like $700 to have it custom made, shipped to me, and everything. And basically pulled out the old one, put in my new Chinese one, and it was fine. And here we had two of those FFUs like you have behind you, which is the 2x4s, and that's what I was using for all of the bags coming out of that 550-liter autoclave. I had no problems. So people do get caught up as far as like the laminar and having flow that is disruptive,
Right.
but if you're using like a 2x4 and you're working in the center of it, you're not going to have any problems with those little vortices coming in and infecting your
Right.
work. But there is a difference between the FFUs and what I would call laminar. I don't call the FFUs laminar because they don't have fins on the front that basically straighten that air out, as it's exiting. And also the way that fan is blowing on the outside, you definitely have hot zones, usually in your corners and somewhere around the middle. And if you took a lighter and went across, you can see that you're getting different flow volumes from different parts of your filter.
When I got mine, because I had to know how it worked, and I already knew they were designed for the ceiling, right? So I'm not a formal engineer, but I'm definitely an engineer at heart. So I'm like, I want to know how this works. I want to make sure I can use it this way. And of course, I immediately noticed that the rubber grommets that the motor's mounted on are just obviously designed for a horizontal mounting. And two of the grommets had, because the person I bought it from, I think they used it or were going to use it as a FFU. So they had it stored in the vertical orientation, and it had already started cracking the grommets. So I had to call up Inverco. I bought a bunch of grommets. I thought it was going to cost me $5. Cost me $75 for a pack of 50 grommets. They would only sell me in a pack of 50. And I asked them why, and they said, well, because, for commercial applications, they're routinely replacing these grommets, even in the horizontal orientation. So I was like, oh, okay, good to know. So yeah, one of the things we're using this thing the wrong way. It works, but you might periodically, especially if you start noticing vibration on your table, you might need to go open the back of that thing up. You might need to, replace the grommets. But anyway, I brought that all up because that blower motor, right? It's just a regular spindle motor. It's got this big little fan plenum, or this fan on it that blows into a plenum, or like a baffle. And then it immediately, so it's just blowing, it'd be like turning your hair dryer and just aiming it or directly at a wall. So all the air goes to the side, and then it wraps around this little baffle and diffuser. And so I bought an anemometer, and I had like air velocity of, I don't know, it's almost double on the edges of what it was in the middle. So I was like, okay, obviously laminar flow means I should have nearly the same air velocity coming off of this grill at just about any point. So that's not the case. It doesn't mean it doesn't work. I mean, these days it's the go-to. Everybody is using these things, unless like you, they're savvy, they're paying attention to some auction or something like that, or they happen to know a local place. Most people are buying these FFUs. They totally work.
Right. And I mean, that's, imagine for a minute, all these other people that actually had something with a deep enough plenum. And then you're already talking about most people don't even have their stainless tables deep enough
Right.
to hold something that big.
That's why I was like, I need to get one. I mean, I'm a woodworker. I could have easily built a bomb custom laminar flow box, but I was like, but it's going to just take up too much space. I mean, it's just going to dig out into the space too much. Maybe if I had an interior wall where I could have mounted it into the wall, and it could have just been in an adjacent room, so for commercial people, I think if I was running a commercial mushroom farm, I would probably build something like that. I think I could probably build a massive wall and do that. But for me at home, this totally did the trick.
Yeah, I have on the 800-pound one, I have these giant intakes. They're like 12-inch pipe intakes. They're supposed to hook to the facility, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I had these ideas like, oh, I'm gonna, run a giant pipe from that and put it onto a wall to another room, and I'll have positive pressure in this room and all this other thing. Meanwhile, I had plenty of protection on the thing. There's no reason to do that. So basically, what I did was build out a frame that fits the same size filter I will use as my pre-filter as my house central air does. So when I buy bulk central air filters, I can use them for this machine, and I can also.
That's so cool.
And also, if you're using the higher end ones, use like the purple pack where it's like all the way down to smog, smut, and dust and mites and everything. But recently, it's been getting hot here, so I changed my house one out to, not as quite of a fine filter because it was struggling to keep up because, you put these high filters and it's hard for everything to get pulled through there. And over time, like you said, it will just perform better and better as far as removing dust in the air as it gets clogged up.
I had the same problem. I put a fancy MERV, I don't know what it was, but pollen, allergy. It wasn't HEPA rated, but it was a very dense filter. And all of a sudden, like a week or two later, my HVAC doesn't work. So we call a guy out because I looked at it. I know a few things about him, and it's like, I don't get what's going on with this thing. Every element works. Everything's working, but it's not working. So what's going on? So the first guy comes out and he goes, oh yeah, it's too old and you need a new unit, and you also need an air conditioner. And I'm like, okay, we're going to get another. Thanks for that. And had another guy come out, and he was just this old crusty dude. And he was like, why do you got that goddamn fancy filter in there? Don't you know your unit can't take that? He's like, where are your other filters? So I'm like, oh, they're over there. So he goes, that's what you put in. He goes, you can't put the wrong thing in there. And I'm like, okay, yeah. If you have a brand new HVAC system that's designed for those, hypoallergenic, filtration levels, all the blowers and the hardware is designed for it. But most people's house, you can't just go you can't look up the size of your filter and just slap it in there. It will affect output for sure.
Even mine is newer, but the problem is after, less than 30 days, that very, very fine filter gets clogged up enough where it sucks so hard it crushes it and pulls it into the freaking furnace. Like, I've got to breathe.
One of mine did that once. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's just physics. For the engineering degree you didn't pursue, you took enough physics to know that vacuums and pressure and all that stuff, how that stuff turns out. Anyway, all right. So filters, if you guys have not seen some of his Instagram posts, this laminar flow hood he's talking about, it is a beast. It is super high level. It's amazing. And the benefit is that it's a perfect environment. I ordered, I don't know, hundreds of plates from him before I poured plates. And I only had a single plate ever come with anything on it. It was a teeny, it never even grew out. So it was like just a fraction of a piece of something. And of course, I contacted Tim, and he's like, hey, yep, next order, just let me know. I'll throw in another plate. And I'm like, I like this guy. This guy is doing all the things I would do. He's doing things the right way. And at the end of the day, I think this is probably, this will be a good segue to actually start talking about plates. I never had a single plate of yours have even a drop of condensation on it. So I would say that is the most common thing I hear people talking about is, I learned how to pour, but I get too much condensation. Why don't you talk about the things you do to prevent condensation? And I've gotten to where if I didn't have that flow hood, I would just have to deal with condensation. It doesn't seem to matter how cool I pour. I don't know if there's some super fancy tricks I'm not doing. I've asked a million people. I'm doing all the tricks. But yeah, so maybe talk about, I imagine you also had a journey when it comes to condensation and figuring out how to get rid of it. And because it definitely freaks people out if they order plates from you and everything's condensated. They're like, is this going to be okay?
So in the beginning, I kind of realized that a lot of people that were having these contam issues, especially shipping them, was caused by the condensation. So if you might not know it, but your plate actually does have a vent in it. So most people buy vented petri dishes. So and you'll see either 3 little tabs or 4 little tabs on the lid that lifts your dish up just ever so slightly so that your air can go in and your culture doesn't die, which really matters for other microorganisms that people are doing that need a lot higher gas exchange. With mushrooms, we've shown that we can pretty much cut the air almost completely off, and it's still going to do some growing. But people want the vented dishes. That's what's pretty much standard. So that little bit of water can basically exit that vent in shipping, have some sort of contam, on the outside where it's not sterile, and that all that water right back into your dish. So that's why I try.
I have never. By the way, I just want to say I've never had anybody explain that, and that makes perfect sense. That's what's happening.
They're shipped on their side. I mean, you're not shipping everything upright, and if you are, they might turn it. So that water is going to roll to one side. It's going to exit a little bit. It's just going to sit there in that puddle, and there's going to be things
touch the outside. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
And the outside's not sterile. Nobody has sterile outside petri dishes unless they're using a sterile machine to pour. If you're doing this by hand, the outside of your dishes, you're just going to consider those as not being sterile. So to combat that, I use the water baths, and I get my agar or Gellan gum to 1 degree above where it would solidify in those water baths.
So, oh, really? Oh, you're really skating that fine of a line.
Right. And so by the time you're done pouring that bottle, if you're not getting little chunk congealing going on, then you probably poured it too hot. You know what I'm saying? And so the time at which it takes for that to solidify in the dish should be a lot shorter. You're not having a lot less vapor release and a lot less condensation issues. Other things is the fact that we stack it in a pile. You always notice the tops and bottoms of it solidify really quick, and you have this hot center. You can always space it out. You could pour them individually. If you're just pouring for yourself, I would just pour all of them flat on the table, and they're going to gel up real quick. And then when they gel, stack them, and you don't have to worry about any of that condensation stuff.
Dude. So is that why? Because I think I've seen a few other people stack almost in a pyramid.
Yeah.
That's kind of that concept of just laying them flat so that, by the time you get to the next row, those have cooled and congealed enough. I have to try that. That's
when I was really big into production, so when I was doing 15,000 to 20,000 plates a month, I would sit there and I'd have to get that hood clear every day. So basically, I'd be packing and pouring every day because I can only fit, 1,500 plates in there at a time. So I would pour and then offset stack is what we were calling it. And so that way, basically, once I got my pyramid built, it was basically already firmed up. And then I stack everything to the side, and then I pour some more.
I see.
I can pack it and get it out of the hood. Right now, I'm not so much in production. I'm not doing those numbers, so I just pour them upright because I'm not trying to do all the extra labor to try to get it out as fast as I needed to before. So now I basically have to pour in the stacks. I leave it for an entire day. And so, not the first day, but the second day after I poured, the condensation is gone and they're ready to go out. But people with horizontal flow, I believe they're ready quicker. You're getting that air that's hitting it from the side. It's pulling away those vapors. Mine's coming from upright, going down that stack. And so it's a lot harder for it to get rid of those droplets of moisture.
Yeah, I actually have the issue. I used to put them right up against the grill, and I had to start pulling them away because if I'd leave them overnight, by the morning, depending upon what media I was using and what I added to the media, I would start getting these cracks.
Yep.
It would pull away in cracks. So I was like, okay, I'm cooling this off a little bit too much.
And so for the cracks, another thing that I've definitely noticed is that depending on the media, that can be, worse. So things like water, agar, it's going to crack really fast.
Yep.
And the reason being is there is nothing in your media to act as a humectant. So the humectants are things like syrups that they use like in food. So food, you think of like corn syrup. So corn syrup would be considered a humectant in that it's like a shelf stabilizer. So it keeps your stuff, it holds on to moisture and allows things to like be able to sit around, right?
Right. Okay.
So when you're just doing water, you have no humectants. So that water is able to escape more readily and your plates will dry out faster.
Gotcha.
So a lot of times these nutrients that we're using that are naturally humectants are actually acting as preservatives for our plate. So it's allowing them to last longer than they would without that ingredient. So they have.
So it's interesting you say that because, so yes, water agar, but then the other one that I have this problem with the worst is anytime I add activated carbon to a plate. And that just makes sense. It's just sucking the moisture out of it in addition to the air, maybe
and it may
too much.
create more surface area for the evaporation from your plate to occur, so you
Right.
lose water more readily.
Yeah.
And with activated carbon, in the beginning we were doing like 2 grams a liter. I found that to be excessive. Now I'm down to 0.5 to 1.5 grams a liter, and that's when people were especially asking me. I don't currently offer them. So some cultures do a weird thing with activated carbon where it's like you switch to it and they'll do really good, or you'll switch to when they don't like it, but then when you switch back to another media, they'll do something differently entirely.
You nailed it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
there's a couple theories. One is like maybe there was a hidden contam, or maybe it kind of like messed with the way it metabolizes things. So it's very interesting. But for most people, the application where they really love carbon plates, they trying to use them all the time, or um, what's the
I just like them if I want to take a really pretty picture and I got a really sexy, monoculture going. I use them for that, or I use them for what you were saying, which is it's an inhibitor in some way, is what I notice. I think the reason sometimes it looks like cultures that haven't been doing so well do better on carbon plates is because it's going rhizo because it's going, I don't like it here. Get me off this plate. So it starts throwing your ropes, and it can make things look real good for a while. But like you said, I used to pour it a lot. I don't pour it a lot anymore. I use it very targeted purposes now because I found it was too inconsistent. It's really hard. Unless you've been doing this for 10 years, 20 years, whatever, and you're working with varieties you really know well, there's nothing like sticking to one media type for quite a while so that you really get to a point where you go, I know how this behaves on this plate now. So now if I try something else, I will understand, or I'll have a baseline for how it behaves.
Yeah. So the other funny thing about the carbon is, I do the tissue culture as well. So with the orchids, when you're starting them from seed, the P6X8, it's very standard for there to be carbon in there. And so
Mm-hmm.
what they say the carbon is for a lot of these things I've had in vitro for a year, 2 years on the same media. I'm not changing it out. So they're saying the carbon is there for metabolites that they exude that would normally kill it, to be
Oh,
absorbed by the carbon.
it gets sucked up by, yeah, it's like how they use it in medicine. They use it to
Right.
absorb toxins and yeah. Oh, interesting.
So it does the same thing with media too. If you ever notice, like when I'll do carbon and I'll put it in the water bath, and I'll see that in the water bath, if you let it like 1 degree above where it's going to set, a lot of times everything will separate. So you'll end up with like this cloudy material down here, and up here you'll end up with like the clear stuff. And when I use the carbon, the clear stuff is always much clearer. It's like the carbon has already done a lot of filtration and
Oh yeah, it's filtered it all down. Yeah. Interesting. So let's talk about that. So water baths. Most of us are not gonna buy a fancy water bath setup like you have. But what I did start doing after you told me about this is when I'm pulling my pressure cooker down into the lab. I still cook upstairs. I'll actually pull them all out, and then I take the trivet and my spacer out, and I will set them back down in the water because I finally listened to you. And that buys me time, because a lot of times for, people who are not doing this as a job, you got the time to cook it, and then you're like, oh crap, I got to go to dinner, or oh, somebody came over. And you can buy yourself a lot of time just by putting it back in that bath, sealing that pressure cooker back up. I mean, hours and hours.
Or for us, it's usually a post office run for me. Like if I wasn't
Right.
able to do that, how would I make my post office run?
Right.
But I got that from the university. So at the university, there was always a water bath that was always on, always running all the time. And like I'd cook something, and like I'd have a class, or I'd got to go home. I'm not staying in the lab,
Yeah.
and you're like, well, just put it in the water bath, come back for it tomorrow. And it's like, it was such a bizarre like idea that I could do that. But
Right.
yeah, you can let it sit there as long as you want, depending on your temperature. If you have it too close and you let it sit too long, you still might have some issues. It'll start at like the top and then just slowly work its way down and be a solid
Right.
block. So you might want to turn it up a degree or two. But the other option that people have is the sous vide. So You can buy a cheap little sous vide off of Amazon where basically it's a heater and a pump, and you put that in like a polycarbonate bin and fill it with water and put your bottles in there. Or you could fill your PC with water and do your CV. Or you could just fill your PC with water and put it on the lowest setting on your stove. Like if it's warm enough for like a little warm and you put your finger in, hey, you're good. Because your agar is not going to set until it's like a little bit on the cooler side. So
I never even thought about that. Or you could get like an induction hot plate. I bet that if you hunted around to find one with a low enough setting,
yeah,
but you could do that too. But see, my gas stove, it will stay too hot. Even on its lowest setting, it's boiling water for me. So
even the induction, it's hard to do like extraction stuff because the lowest setting is usually like 600 watts, and it's still want to boil. You gotta like do a double boil method with those.
Now I have my, where is it here? I have my Thermoline. It's a hot plate. It's a stir plate and hot plate, and that I can use it for that purpose. But where I have it sitting, it's not really convenient for that. And the plate itself is not super large. But yeah, I could do a bottle that way. I did that once or twice.
Originally, the water bath I had was one you could buy off eBay. It's like this Chinese one, where it's like put together really roughly, and it has these little rings so you could put different size bottles in these holes. So I had like an 8-hole one. At that point, I was pouring 500 milliliter bottles. That's before I poured 1 liter. I was like, 1 liter, that's a huge bottle. Like, I don't want to hold that. How am I going to hold a 1 liter bottle in my hands? And I went to see MycoVations. They were in North Carolina, and she's a little lady, and she was pouring the 1 liter bottles. And I was like, oh, well, I guess I
can't let a woman show you up, Tim. You got to pour those 1 liters.
And you can fit 7 in the 23-quart Prestos, so it's kind of like a perfect size. And I think with the slim lines, which I've never used, you might be able to fit 8. But I use these. So these are the Kimball.
That's what I use. Yep. Yeah, and I got 2 bad shoulders, but my left shoulder's real bad. Or I'm sorry, my right shoulder's real bad, and they do get a little heavy.
It gets to my back after pouring like 50 liters. My back, but not my arms.
But dude, the amount of plates you've poured, dude. I mean, you got all the specialized. You're like those freaking arm wrestlers that do those super bizarre exercises, working muscles no one gives a crap about. You have all those muscles.
I have that sinewy strength.
Yes.
That allows me to just pour and pour.
Tendon strength. Yes.
These are the Kimball 𝐬𝐚𝐧𝐭. I've been using these pretty much since the beginning. Like in the beginning, I had Chinese bottles that you take them out of the PC and they'd be broken or they explode, or you set them down and they crack. But ever since like pretty much 2017, I bought a case of these. I've never broken one. Nice. And I have 100. I have over 100 of these, and some of these have been used hundreds of times. And I've dinged them up. You can see they're scratched up. So hard glass that's going to last you. You're like, oh, why don't we spend $20 on a bottle? I've gotten hundreds of uses out of this bottle, and I feel safe pouring it. I don't know if you've seen anybody that's had accidents with hot Agar exploding on them.
I'm not trying to have that. No.
But a lot of people are like, I'll use a liquor bottle. Work? Yeah, it'll work until it doesn't. Like, you're pouring something out of there that's like boiling temperatures. You're taking out of hot and you're putting on a surface that's cool with something that's not glass. It's made to handle rapid temperature changes.
Yeah, I've not had that problem. I've also never cracked a just a ball jar in the pressure cooker or anything like that. But I pay attention and listen to everybody. And somebody told me very early on that when you're ramping up that temperature in your pressure cooker, most people that have those problems are either ramping up the temperature too fast or cooling it down too fast. And as long as you're paying attention to that,
borosilicate glass, it's not been a problem. So I have I think mine is 18. I have the 3600 watt 220 induction one. I'll turn it to the max and run it all the way up, and it'll get to 15 psi in like 5 minutes with my bottles. Allow it to naturally cool because you can't let it boil over.
Right.
And then I can take it hot from the PC and put it straight in the water bath if I want to. I don't, because then my water bath water is going to be so hot it's going to take extra long.
Oh, right.
But I've done it before in situations where I had to leave for like 5 hours. I know it's super hot.
You just got no
choice. I'm going to put it in the cold water, and it's going to be fine. That borosilicate glass can handle those, different temperatures really well. So like, I was also going to show you. So the trivets, like in the beginning, this is what I was doing. So this is like one of the original trivets.
Right.
This is the little.
Everybody gets, they do that and they think they're super cool. Yeah, I know.
So this is the piece of aluminum that comes with it, and then the stainless steel. And then I got these ball ones because I was afraid of it scratching everything up. So I got these little ball ends so I wouldn't scratch up my PC. And I mean, that's what I've used for a long time, but they're big, they're bulky, and they're kind of expensive to make. And recently I've been doing just the new ones where I got where it's just this and then one of these trivets.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
So they don't come like this. They come with these straight up, but I just bend them out a little bit and they lock right to that groove. Put your stuff on there and you're done. And so with this rise, I think it's 2.5 inches, I can fit a gallon of water in every one of those 23-quart Prestos. So with a gallon of water, I'm never worried about boiling over with the bottles, and I can get, over 2 hours with like substrate or grain, and my water's not going away. It'll start to go, but I'm not gonna destroy any more PCs. I've definitely destroyed a few in the beginning, some of the smaller ones where you get it so hot, the aluminum like melts out and makes this cool little sculpture on your stove top. Or like, you're like, well, why? You turn it off and it's still like the steam pressure still going up. And you don't know that means it was out of water because it's got this runaway reaction going. But you destroy a few PCs in the beginning before you really get it down.
Yeah, I did one. I got real slick like you, and I did all my research before I approached Presto, and of course I never said a word about mushrooms. I was canning, and I don't know what happened. I think your gauge was faulty, and I managed to get it replaced for free, even though it was my fault. So that was me being a manipulative, malicious little consumer. But I was so mad. I was so indignated. Man, how this is not right. It cost $150. I shouldn't have to buy another one. I haven't done one since, but that's because when I make a mistake, I always try to figure out exactly why I made the mistake so I don't make it again. And so, yeah. You got to ramp that temperature up a little bit slower. I think I've heard you say before, just always buy the induction capable unit. It's got a thicker base. It's very important. They're not rated. I mean, those Presto 23 quarts are amazing. There's a lot of people, I've talked to people that went to All Americans and were like, yeah, you know what? It's cool. It's a little more capacity, but man, that Presto is great.
Yeah.
And, but the trick is they're not rated for over 1200 BTU. And most people's big burner, front right is usually 18,000 BTU. So if you're cranking it up high, or if you have a super setting, maybe you can go up to 21,000 BTU. You can definitely get that base too hot, especially if you're doing a long run, you run low on water. It can deform even without running out of water if your temp's too high. So you just got to watch out.
I have 4 of the induction units now, and I use all those on induction tops. And so me getting up to pressure is super fast. I can put those on a standard stove, and it just takes so long. Like I'm just spoiled with the induction ones now because, like,
yeah, I've never done it. Maybe I gotta try it. You're getting me.
That
like
heat is going straight to that iron plate inside of there, and it's just transferring to your water, and it's super fast. I don't even use the regular ones anymore. I actually sold them. I don't have them anymore. And I have a couple of the All Americans here I don't use, and I've had some I sent back just because my metal seal wasn't working good, and it was definitely too heavy, empty to put on my glass top, much less fully loaded.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you've seen, there is new, I think they're like the Buffalo pressure cookers. They have like a 30-liter version, and they have like a 40-liter version. They have big ones.
What?
And they have ones that are flat and really big. You can see them on Amazon. But one of their
models, never even heard about this.
I think it's like a 26-liter. They have a model that is induction. So I have been eyeballing that one. But their larger ones are not induction. They're just regular. You have to use a flame or a turkey fryer or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Buffalo. Oh, they look nice.
They look nice. Yeah, some people really like them. And they're not as expensive as All American. You've got more, opportunities to do different things. They have different shapes. I think one's like flatter but bigger.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at 37 quart, and it looks real wide.
And it says it fits some ridiculous number of jars. So I know some people are using those now as another choice. So there's not just, the Presto V All American.
Right. It's either $150 or $1,000 or,
I mean, some people
maybe.
are doing what the Miro, I think, was one.
Oh, there was one. Was it Moon Free? There's one Dave Wombat uses
Oh yeah,
that looks really cool. He says he can run it at like 20 psi. It looks. I don't know. So I think it's worth just quickly mentioning for people watching. Everybody's afraid of pressure cookers because everybody's got some story from their family. Well, your Aunt Jean lost she lost an ear when her, like, because everybody used to can, and so everybody's got a story about a pressure cooker blowing up. The redundancy of safety that is on even your most basic Presto pressure cooker is absurd. There are multiple failure points so that it will, depressurize before this thing's going to blow up. The worst you're going to have is the bottom will deform and maybe the top some little part of it will fail and let a lot of air off. But you're not going to have this massive bomb. It's not going to shoot through your ceiling and into your ceiling joists. It's not going to be quite that bad. So I just want to tell everybody who I've ever talked to about this, who I just say, you don't have to be as afraid as you used to be about these pressure cookers. They are not as dangerous as they used to be.
They are 15 psi for a reason. As long as they're 15 psi, they're regulated for home use. If you go over it, then you're talking about industrial use, and there's a reason why 15 psi club and everything exists. It's like they fall under different regulation. It's like the boats where they did like the 9.9 horsepower if it was over 10, and
I didn't know that about the PSI. Is that why like the Instapots are a lower PSI? Does that buy them some sort of
lower? I just feel like it's probably they
a money thing.
Save a buck and make it even cheaper and say, well, we don't need this thick gauge and we save 10% here.
Yeah. Now, theoretically, I remember somebody saying, oh, they don't work. It's not 15 PSI. And it's like, well, you obviously don't understand pressure sterilization methodology. It just means if it's a little bit lower PSI, it's just got to run longer. I've never seen the chart that goes below 15 PSI, but I'm sure you could find that chart and figure out how long to run it. I mean, it will work. They're just tiny, man. Like you're going to get to run just a few pint jars. And if you're cool with that, it will work.
And you could go over it too if you had the fancy equipment. I mean, if you were doing 25 psi, your times for sterilization is going to be really short. But if you're doing something like that and you have something really thick, and you're talking about heat penetration, it gets a little complicated. And a lot of people get hung up, like especially with the big blue Mycos, they want like, well, I don't know what my core temps were, and I don't know that I'm hitting certain temps over this period of time, and if I'm running it hot too fast. And to me, I don't get caught up on all the number stuff. Basically, if I'm doing batches and everything's coming out clean, and if I want to scale it down and I'm having issues, I can find that sweet spot. I don't have to know, if there was a pocket of air here, or if this certain part reads. If you're getting success and your stuff's coming out clean, and that's all right. I don't have to know everything that's going on there. So with the Prestos, I don't do the whole purge air thing, So basically,
oh, you don't?
No.
But are you talking about running media though?
Yes.
Or do you not do it ever?
No, I don't.
Oh.
So I get it rocking and rolling. Basically, as I'm prepping stuff, I put water in it, 1 gallon of water. I get it so it's boiling, and I keep peeking at it. And as soon as water starts dribbling out the top, I'm like, well, it's hot. I open it up, put all my stuff in, shut the lid. It automatically, that lock goes up, and I let it run.
Dude,
I'm not sitting there.
Pro tips. I got to start doing this. I love that.
I'm not sitting there looking to see when the steam comes out and all that stuff. I just get it rocking and rolling, and then I throw stuff in, shut it, walk away. And then the really nice thing about the induction plates is they have timers. So they're very similar to an autoclave. As far as, once it hits temps, I set my temp, set my time, I walk away. And then whenever I want to come back, I can come back.
Right.
So I can't set it from the very beginning,
Right.
But if we had a way for it to hear when that's rocking and do it itself, I'm sure you could fully automate it. There are digital.
I got people who might be able to work on that for us.
Yeah.
They're into meters and gears and measurement devices and data collecting and all that. So that's a good idea. That would be great because you really could use that sound. I'm sure you could.
As a cue. You could use the sound as a cue, or you could use a digital gauge where it hits that certain one and your timer starts. Another thing I want to hit on is when I do my bottles, You know, a lot of people talk about they put the caps all the way on. I don't. It's about that loose. So it's
Yep,
probably
that's what I do.
half a turn loose, and that's because a lot of times you're going to have boil over or things going on. And the other important thing is, as soon as that lock drops, I'm opening that pressure cooker and I'm tightening all these lids. So when that lock drops, you're still having excess of pressure in here where it's still coming out. If you let it sit too long, you're going to have where this is becoming a cooling cycle and it starts pulling things in.
And it'll pull
So-
air in.
So it's important that as soon as that's done going and you're able to access it, go ahead and tighten all your lids and then come back 5 minutes later because they'll be loose again from the, expansion.
Now, so what if the question, counterpoint. So what if I am running that cycle at night before I go to bed? I get it done. I turn the stove off. I go to bed. I don't touch it. I'm cool, right? Then because I do that sometimes, and then I'll just bring it down, or I'll bring it down and let it sit in front of the flow hood, and then the next morning I open it up. Yeah, I always if I'm not in front of the flow hood with the media bottle, I'm always tightening my lid, like my stir plate's up there. So sometimes just to keep things stirred up real nice, I'll put up there, I always tighten the lid. But yeah,
Yeah, I've never done it that way. I've always been scared because if you look at the Stamets book, he talks about how, they were using like rags to put over the PC holes. So like when it does pull a vacuum, it's not pulling contaminants into the thing and then into the thing. But I don't think it's doing it. I mean, you're pulling from these little tiny holes. Like you're not pulling a crap ton of dust and it's spinning around in there.
Well, I should say when I put it in front of the flow hood, it's on too. So if it does pull air in, theoretically, it should be pulling clean air in. But that's a good point because a lot of people are not doing that. The minute, that's the important point I think you're hitting on, is that as soon as it's not a pressure environment and it's going through a cooling cycle and you have the cap loose, it will be pulling air into that bottle.
Right. And another thing is, we can talk about headspace. So I have this much headspace, pretty much where this line is, it's 1 liter. And a lot of this is for like when it's boiling and it comes out, you don't want a bunch of agar and everything. And I don't want too much headspace because then when you're talking about pulling vacuums and everything, like when you open it to go pour it, your vacuum is pulling is going to be a lot worse if you have a lot of headspace. Because some people like to do it like, well, 700 milliliters or whatever. But you really want, this is probably the most appropriate amount of headspace you want for making the medium bottles. And you can do different size bottles. And like when we talk about how good stuff grows, I found that when you're using smaller bottles, you actually have better. And I don't know why. So like,
wait, what?
I've cooked.
Are you serious?
Yes, I've cooked in 100 milliliter bottles compared to the 1 liter bottles, and the 100 milliliters just great growth, but it's so impractical. Like I'm not pouring 100 milliliter bottles. You know what I'm saying? But yes, there is a difference in growth, and that's with them being cooked for the same amount of time, same PSI. I have found that the smaller bottles have better growth.
What do you have a theory about that?
It's going to be some sort of thermodynamics as far as like how the media is cooked. I think that there could be something said about cooking stuff longer. So it could be possible that things that are cooked better, like because it's smaller and it's hotter in the space,
it should cook better.
That it changes the way your growth is. I mean, so there's a lot of things that affect growth. We talk about the size bottle, the water, the inputs, the ingredients. To me, what temperature it's poured can affect it, because if you're using ingredients that aren't soluble, things that could settle out, then all those are falling to the bottom and aren't accessible by your mycelium. Also, how homogenized it is. So like I always, right before I pour, everything goes on the stir plate.
Same, yeah.
Become homogenized, and then you pour because you want it all to be the same. You don't want any sort of separation. And a lot of people ask me about doing like no pours where they're cooking agar in the container and they're having issues with like it being watery or whatever. It's like, well, you've got no way to like remix your ingredients or to mix your ingredients with your agar. I mean, I'm sure there's ways and protocols you can make it work, but it's not going to be easy. You're going to have to figure out some way to make it work.
Yeah, I mean, no pours. I know lots of people who do them. They're a necessary evil if that's what you're doing. It's probably not ideal, especially if you're starting to get fancy with additives that, like you say, can settle out and all that stuff. I'm also I'm just so neurotic, so I gotta stir it for a couple seconds before I pour it. Now, I want to talk to you about this. I just saw yesterday on Facebook somebody going through their Agar Tech And I even remember seeing fresh from the farm fungi, Gary Hefferly. He had a video where he's on the stove, he's heating it up, he's mixing it with this fancy hand. Sorry, I want to make sure you guys, mine's not in the gutter. Like this little like hand whisker frother, yeah. And so I did that in the beginning, and then I talked to you one day, and you're like, "F all that, just dump the shit in." The only thing that I actually do, because I run sorghum syrup now, which we'll get into, because that's also thanks to you. But I pour my water, distilled water, and I always use distilled water for all my agar. I do not use tap water. And add my sorghum syrup, and then that goes on the stir plate. I want that to be completely dissolved. Then I add my agar, or if I'm going to add yeast, I add yeast first, because that's also hard to get. You start to learn what things mix well and what don't. But I have an order to how I get it all mixed. But I'm not heating anything up. I'm just getting it pretty well mixed. And sometimes the yeast goes back to the top, and that's neither here nor there, because you were the guy that told me, don't fucking worry about it. Just put it in the PC and let it cook out. It's going to boil. And in that process, it's gonna get all mixed up. I was like, mind blown.
Yeah, and before I started my journey, I read through the Stamets book. I did as much research as possible, and then my advisor at the university, I'm showing, well, this is how I do this, how I do this, and he just gives me these crazy looks. And he's like, "Why are you pre-cooking all that agar and putting it in the bottle? Like, just throw it in, put your water. All that's gonna get sorted out in the autoclave. You got nothing to worry about."
Right.
So I kind of do a mix now. So what I do is I put basically about 300 milliliters. Put all my dry ingredients with a funnel, just dump them in there so it's weighed out correctly. Put it on the stir plate, let it all get mixed up, and then I fill up the rest of the water. And I put it back on the stir plate, and then I
Bro, we're like almost identical. I do 400. Yeah, I do 400
if you have this much, you can't get a good mixing action. Unless you have a really strong stir plate like mine. So you want it to stir this. And the other thing is use cold water. I don't use hot water.
Yeah.
The reason being is, this is like a cooking trick, is like when you add sugars and things to hot water, it creates this sticky ball that has dry ingredients on the center and wet syrup on the outside, and it can't be accessed. So you're creating these things that aren't going to mix easily. Whereas you use cold water, it kind of just drops in. It's like all in powder, and it just flattens out on the bottom.
Right.
And it's not hot and melty and sticky, and then it mixes fine. So no hot water, just straight cold water. And so when they go in that PC, they're cold bottles, so they're not preheated or anything like that.
Yep. I got crystal clear pores, especially if my goal for, like, sometimes I'm doing thin plates because I want to look at stuff under a microscope, and so I'll run extra light malt extract just to keep things real clear, or maybe Korean corn syrup, something just where, so my plates are basically clear, and yeah, doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It is worth, anybody who does pour their own agar, it's worth, if you're spending extra time heating it up, you should mix it up. I think it's probably worth the time to do a little mixing, just in case some random clump gets caught somewhere. But the heating, as soon as I took that pro tip from you, I have never looked back on that.
The only ingredient you really have to worry about is the malt. If you do have some malt that's kind of clumpy, it can end up being like these stuck together little strings where it cooks together in the PC.
Right. Yep.
But your other ingredients should not be doing that. And Gellan gum, it doesn't really dissolve very well in the water before the PC, but when it comes out crystal clear. So like, it's kind of deceiving. It almost looks like it's like wax in the water to start, but it's got no problems once you heat it up and get it to temperature.
All right, so now we got to do the hit list of innovations since they've sort of come up here. So sorghum syrup, your understanding, and my understanding as well, is no one was messing with sorghum syrup until old Tim a Tip of the Cap said, "Hey guys, I'm pouring these sorghum plates." And I remember the posts on Instagram where you're like, sorghum is working. The mycelium is like in the sorghum, which of course makes sense. It's derived from milo. It's a very common and popular grain to colonize mycelium with. How did you come, like, how did that fall on your lap where you're like, oh, I'm going to try this weird syrup that pretty much only Amish people know about?
I think that, in the beginning, we were doing all the standard media. So in the beginning, it was all learning about, like, what is MYA? What is everybody's understanding of it? What's MA? What's PDA? What's PDYA? What's the fungal auger? What's all these different ones that are standard? And then from there, it was kind of branching out on my own. And then with the malts, a lot of people were talking about, well, you have dry malt versus the syrups. And, the syrups seemed like they were acting as better humectants than the dry ones were.
Oh,
And they
okay.
seemed to do better and you had better growth. And so I was like, well, I'm going to try some other syrups. So I went to the store, which was a Mennonite store, and they
Oh,
had
there you go. There you
the
go.
sorghum syrup. And then I tried molasses. I tried corn syrup. I tried dark corn syrup. I tried pure maple syrup. Somebody like taps locally. I tried all these different syrups, and sorghum syrup out of all of them really had good performance. And it was just very basic. Just the syrup, just the agar in the beginning, and had really good growth. Prep tip for it: whenever I'm doing sorghum that day, I keep my sorghum. It comes in a glass jar, so I take that glass jar, I boil it so that it's really runny, and I put them in a polypropylene bottle with a small top.
Oh,
And then
okay.
whenever I go to make sorghum syrup that day, I take that polypropylene bottle and I put it in a pot of boiling water. And so when I get to that, it pours like water. But originally,
Oh,
the sorghum syrup that I had was out of Indiana, I think, and it was kind of runny. It wasn't that big a deal to pour, but the stuff that I get now, it is so thick. Like you pour it, it's like the people at Dairy Queen where they turn it upside down and like it's not going anywhere. And
it's
I'm
not
like,
coming
I
out.
don't have all day to sit here and wait on syrup to pour. So I always make sure it's really hot, really runny, and so that way when I go to make it, it's really quick. So 15 grams of sorghum syrup, 1.5 grams of yeast extract, and then 15 to 20 grams of agar, depending on your agar strength. I would recommend 20.
Okay.
Um, agar is another thing. So I go on the hard side for agar. Reason being is, we're trying to create um, two-dimensional growth. We're not trying to create three-dimensional growth. And when you get really soft stuff, you kind of notice that it likes to dive and shoot back up and do these weird fuzzy things. Whereas if you got really hard media, it wants to stick right across, make these lanes where it
Oh,
converges, and you get that rhizo.
holy shit, dude. So for a while, because I've been doing a lot more spore germination, I have been running all my plates at 15 for
Uh-huh.
agar. Because I've found that if it's a little wetter, spores like a little bit better. But I have also noticed recently some weirder growth. So you're suggesting that sometimes you get those changes in mycelial growth because instead of it being directly on the surface, if your agar is just a little soft enough, it's diving into and affecting then the morphology of the growth. That is fascinating.
Yeah, you get these weird rings, you get these like weird ghosty spots. Like I try to make it pretty hard. And that's why with the Gellan gum, like
Oh, we lost you.
that's why with the Gellan gum I'm up to 15, because normally if you read all the literature's like, well, if you use Gellan gum, you only have to use half the rate. Well, right now I'm at about three-quarters the rate for Gellan gum. Because a lot of the literature, um, you go and you try it experimentally and things just aren't, what they say.
Right.
So a lot of this stuff you have to play around with, and that was a lot of that was playing around with the different ingredients like the sorghum syrup. The other ones I didn't have good growth, but some people have had good growth with corn syrup. To me, it's been slow.
It's not
um,
great. No.
some people will have good luck. I feel like with molasses, you have to find the stuff that has no sulfur in it, things like that. So you have to be careful about some ingredients. Date syrup, some people have been doing good with the date syrup. That's another one you find like
Ooh,
at a food store. Probably make delicious plates. So
nice.
um,
I know nothing about date syrup. I do know with the corn syrup, the Caro corn syrup, American corn syrup, it usually has vanilla and salt in it. And a lot of people use it for various, like for media and stuff like that. But if you get Asian corn syrup, it's usually just corn syrup, and it seems to slightly outperform it. Why, I have no idea. Maybe it's like a placebo effect of feeling like it's a sexier product because I'm going to an Asian grocery store and sourcing this thing, but it seems like it's a little superior. But overall, man, the sorghum, it's the winner. That's my go-to. Every once in a while, just to, keep it lively for the old mycelium over here at the Geeky household, I'll run some malt for a while. But
And
yeah, sorghum's my go-to.
I would be careful. Like, if people are sourcing it, what you want is sorghum syrup that is like made for the table. I've
Yeah.
tried sorghum syrup that's made for beer. So people that want to have beer that has no glutens and things like that, they do make like
Okay.
sorghum syrup for that, as well as rice syrup or rice solids that are gluten free. But I haven't had much luck with those for whatever reason. I think they don't have quite of a complex like a mineral content. I think one of the main reasons is the minerals that are present. So
Oh,
the guys that make this is like, you know, I try to get in contact because I want to buy a barrel of it, right? Because I go through a lot of
right.
sorghum syrup,
Yeah.
and all it has is an address, and I can't find a phone number, no way to contact it. So I look up the address on Google and I find the closest store, and I'll call. It's like, well, maybe they know something about it. And they're like, "Oh, who are you looking for?" And they're like, "The guy that makes the sorghum syrup. Oh, he's in the store right now. You want to talk to him?" And so the guy, he's Amish, I think. He's like, "Yeah, I don't
I
have a
bet he
phone.
is. Yeah.
Like, there is no way to contact me. You're lucky. Like,
Right.
I just happen to be here. But like, you write me a letter and tell me what you want, and like have some way to pay me, and then I can ship it to you." Like, it's this old school way of like trying to source this stuff. Um,
Wow.
but he's like, it's like an art. So how they make it, it's very similar like with the maple syrup, where they or it's actually like cane sugar. They'll grow sorghum that's much different than what you're familiar with. It's like these big giant canes, like sugar cane, and then that's getting run through the press, like to squeeze out all the juices, and they're taking that,
Ah,
boiling and cooking it down just like maple syrup. And so he's like, there's kind of like a art to it. It's not really exact science. Like, everybody does it different and comes out with different products, and like he usually sells out of everything he's got. Like, people are on a waiting list for it. Um, but it's good stuff. I don't know if you ever made your plates and licked your finger, like where you clean the lid
oh,
afterwards.
dude.
Good tasting
Yeah.
stuff.
They so the Amish use it on their pancakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's only just so many maple trees, so they can they can create a crop, and so yeah, they love the sorghum syrup. But yeah, every time I'm pouring, because so here's what I get.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Muddy Pond.
That bottom one is
Sorry.
one I think I get.
Oh,
But
you
yeah.
get the bottom. Okay, so you get Oberholzer, and
Yeah.
I get Muddy Pond. All right. So anyway, but it pours all right. It's a little thick. It's like maple syrup, but I'm always playing this dance of how thick is the stream to get the weight right, and then I used to just try to teeter it off at the end, and then I'm like, nope. So now I have a thing where I interrupt the stream and then like kind of pull it away,
Yeah.
and then of course you gotta lick the finger. Yeah, it's a
That's
little
your
side
reward.
treat.
It's like a reward.
Yes, it's a little dopamine hit for using sorghum for sure.
Um, yeah, it's funny you
Which
never realize that things like syrup pouring would be a talent, but it sounds like something in the Midwest that you would see like at a county fair, is like a syrup pour. Like, I can pour 10 grams of syrup perfect.
right. I mean, of course, if I was doing it every day, I bet I could get to a point where I wouldn't even need to weigh it. I could just probably know, like roofing framers, they got nailing schedules. And if you go back, these guys have been, either roofing or framing, and they have all these nail schedules. The inspector, if they're a jerk, they'll come and they'll start, actually measuring it. And these guys that are just eyeballing, let's say 8-inch, nail spacing, man, these framers are hitting that within like an eighth of an inch every time. I mean, so that repetition, I tell a lot of people that like this, it's going to be real awkward in the beginning, and the more you can get repetition in that skill, you'll gain confidence. That's
Yeah,
why guys
anyway.
like you who are
Yeah, yeah.
pouring
Right. That's what I was gonna
every
say.
second of the day, like no one's ever going to be as good at pouring as you.
Yeah, it's
Just
like
not good.
15 milliliters perfect for every dish. You got some
Yeah.
people doing the seriological pipettes, and
Yeah. The pumps, I've seen the pumps. Those
yeah,
look
so
way too slow
yeah,
for
it takes
me,
you back
but
to Agar Addicts, who's doing the pumps. But in the beginning of the sorghum syrup, I showed him the sorghum syrup, and he was pretty much responsible for telling everybody about it. And he was like,
nice.
"Oh yeah," he put me onto the sorghum syrup, and he was really psyched and hype about it. He's like, "Oh, what if you do LC with it?" I was like, "I don't know, you could try it." So we
Yeah.
started doing the LCs with it. There's some people that don't like the darker LCs, but over time, your LC it either clears up and gets less dark, or there's enough mycelium where it doesn't look as dark. I don't know which is the case.
So I used to run a super crystal clear LC, and it worked great. And it's for people first learning. I think it's a great recipe to use, because just when the mic settles down, that top is as clear as water, and it's a great first indicator that things are going well. And if it gets cloudy, just dump it. There's no way it gets cloudy and something's not going wrong. Now, with a few exceptions, I've had a few strains of things that it gets just a little bit cloudy. I think that might have to do with how I'm stirring it. I'm not certain, but I do sorghum now for all my LCs. I don't run LC that much. I just do it because I actually kind of think it's fun and looks cool to watch the liquid culture grow. But it's still a clear, right? There's still the clear space at the top.
Yeah.
I don't find it to be.
And once you put it in a syringe, it's like it's not dark at all. It's so thin.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I have this, so this will be like probably the darkness that I usually use right there.
Oh yeah, that looks great. Love it. Yep. Now, so I'm usually I do 600 ml, and then I think I'm doing 12 grams of sorghum syrup. So I don't know what that, was that 2%?
That's a high nutrient level right there.
Yeah. That, and then the other pro tip somebody told me, he was like, put it on a stir plate. Don't ever take it off. And he's like, you just want a little divot. You want it to spin fast enough that it just barely pulls a divot down. And in a week, I have the thickest freaking LC you've ever seen in your life. So doing those two things. But of course, if you're maintaining 38 bottles of liquid culture, most people are not going to buy 38 stir plates.
I could do it. I think I have 38 positions.
I know you do. I've seen you. Yeah, you have plenty. You could do it, but
I really like the intermittent stir plate for the LC, and I think who is it? Somebody else was recommending that. I can't remember his name right now, but I like to do just like, here and there. I'll turn it on here and there. I don't on all the time, but I maximize it out. And then I have heavy duty ones, so it really gets them going. Roll.
Now, so the theory, you can do the intermittent, and so when I have multiple bottles, obviously I only have one stir plate, so one's going to get sat on there for a while until I happen to come down and do something in the lab, and then that one comes off, a new one comes on. But every time I swap them out, I put them all on the plate and I rev them at max speed, pull a big funnel of air down, really get them all chopped up. You're doing, my understanding of the stirring is you're both trying to keep the mycelium from really solidifying into anything, that you'd never be able to pull into. Yeah, exactly. Tornado, just like that.
All the way to the bottom.
I love doing that. Yes. And that's really good, especially if you haven't gotten to it for a minute and you can run it like that for an hour. It will break up quite a bit of stuff and give you plenty to pull into a 16 gauge. But the other thing it's doing, even if you're stirring it slowly, is the mycelium then, as it's stirring, it's moving all around and it's periodically making its way to the surface, getting some more air, it goes back down. It's, it's helping with the oxygenation process. But yeah, LC works great. At the end of the day, I don't think I'm a big LC person overall. I do it because it's just fun. And every once in a while, if I know I just want something to colonize really fast on grain, I'll do it. But man, for most people who are not running a commercial application of any sorts, Agar plates, they show all. You got high trust. If the mic looks fantastic on the plate and you toss it in some grain, things are probably going to go well.
I think it was Microblast. He was recommending the intermittent. But as far as like for the LC, like if you have zero infrastructure for doing sterile transfers, I still like LC for people just because.
Oh, you're right. Yes.
They can go from a needle to something like this straight to their grain bag, with an injection port on it. Yeah. And they don't have to have a flow hood or anything like that.
Correct. That's true.
So I think it does have its purpose and its use. I prefer to dump plates in because, like you said, I can see it and see what's going on, and I have a million plates. Why would I make LC? Just dump it in.
Right.
But I think for somebody that has like zero ways to do it, and I think it's the next stepping stone. So say you start off with pre-knocked up bags, and then you move to buying sub and grain, then you move to like making your own sub maybe, and then you move to like making LC, and then it's just part of one of those steps is like becoming independent.
You're right. You're right. That's absolutely true. And these days, there's a lot of people who I've had a few people have conversations with me where they're like, "Man, people just got to get off this liquid culture. Like they start growing with liquid culture, and then they don't ever want to do anything else." And I'm like, "Okay, who cares? Like, we're not the police. It's a free country. I mean, why do you care? Who cares? Let them do that. It works for the very reasons you just said, which is if you don't have a flow hood, God, you don't even need a still air box to do that.
Well,
You
also,
could use oven tech. You could just
I mean,
turn your HVAC off in a room and just work fast. You could spray Lysol right before you. There's 100 ways you could do that with very little gear.
there's people that for the same reason they buy pre-poured plates or pre-made spawn or pre-made grain or pre-made sub is like maybe they don't want to dedicate
Right.
another whole part of their life to another whole process. Maybe
Wait, Tim.
just
Some
wanna do
people don't want to have mushrooms take over every
yeah,
facet of their
maybe
life.
they
What?
just want to do the parts that they find fun and
Right.
fulfilling and not have to do all of it because
Yeah.
like that's what it takes over everything. Like
Agreed. Yeah. Oh, if I didn't, I mean, look, I only started pouring when I had the flow hood. Before that, I just bought plates from you for that very reason. And like I was talking to somebody recently, I think it was on the show, I can't remember, but one of my friends, he just moved from Colorado where he had nothing but space and he had a big old flow hood. And now he is moving to the Eastern Seaboard and he's going to live in an apartment. And so not only does he not have the flow hood anymore, but he's like a lot of things he used to do, he's now going to have to source because of his living situation. And so, it's easy to be like, everybody's got to do everything, or everyone should pour this and everyone should make that. But like, you don't know that living situation of that person. You don't know what's going on with them. You don't know. I mean, they might be a high profile lawyer and all they want to do is get the medicine. So they source everything. And so they get to enjoy a little bit of the hobby, but they don't have to do all the mundane tasks because pouring's not fun. I mean, I don't enjoy it. I don't hate it. I think the one I dislike the most is mixing substrate and hitting field capacity. That's the one that feels the most like work for me. But I mean, I used to pour every week, and now I try to pour huge batches just so I can go a while and not have to pour for that very reason.
well, people don't they do evaluation of it. Like you can always do it cheaper yourself. Well, none of these people are valuing maybe that
Their
person's
time.
labor is
Yeah.
worth more than you think it is, and maybe you're undervaluing your own labor. Like nobody puts it
Yep.
like, oh, the agar's $1.50 a packet, and the sugar and the water, and you cook it for 2 hours,
Right.
for an hour for it to cool
Yeah.
down, and then you can pour for another hour. See, it doesn't cost anything. Like you
Right.
said, 5 hours.
Yeah.
That's if you value your labor.
What do you
maybe
get paid an hour
$100.
at your job?
So,
Right? If you get paid $20 an hour at your job and you're spending 5 hours pouring $40 worth of plates, you just lost money, homie. Like that was not a good move for you. But people don't always think that way. I had that where I bought a bunch of poo sub recently, and for just like a split second, the price, I was like, man, it's so much more than doing it yourself. And then I sat there and go, okay, so, and I live in an area where a bunch of these dudes got horses. I could get horse poo without like 2 seconds, like more than I could run a business. And but then you got to do all the work. And I'm specifically, that's the part of this that I enjoy the least. So yes, it is absolutely worth that money to me because it would take hours and hours and hours. And if I factor, like, do I spend 12 hours doing this part of the hobby, or do I go to my job for 12 hours definitely makes sense for me to go to my job for 12 hours. If I'm in my head trying to convince myself I'm saving money, because what they do in their head, I know this because contractors do this too. They only think about materials, right? Well, the materials is only this much. Oh, it's only $80,000 worth of materials to build that house. God, and these guys are getting $600,000 for that house. God, I'm going to make a killing. Then they hire their crew, they pay their workers' comp insurance. I mean, they make mistakes, and at the end of the day, these spec home builders are making no money because they're not factoring in the labor cost. Got to factor in the labor cost, guys. It's part of the deal.
I mean, I know people that buy, for me, they'll buy 1,000 plates at a time. I know people that'll buy like 300 LC syringes at a time. People that'll buy, these bulk pallets of substrate or grain.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't have a production facility or whatever, but like if they can get it at a good deal, flip it, inoculate it, do whatever they're doing, knock it up, and then what do they care? Like if they're paying $1 a plate for me and they're reselling it with a culture on it for $25. Why would you ever?
Why would you ever? Yeah.
If you're in production.
Yeah. When you're, especially like you're saying, if you're buying in bulk and getting a price break on something that's sterile and the shelf life of it, like CVG substrate in a sealed bag, I could make a pallet order of that once a year and I'm good. Right? Like, I mean, the shelf life, maybe 6 months. I don't know what the shelf life would be before you'd have to start worrying about water content loss. But
I had some that was sitting here for a year that I just used, and I didn't have no issues. So I did. It was one of the experimental. I think that was hemp. Hemp VG. So HVG.
HVG, of course, Tim. It's always you with the acronyms, dude.
That's how you got to keep it all straight. It's make everything accurate.
Yeah, it's true. All right, well, let's talk about Gellan gum. You mentioned it a little bit. I bought Gellan gum plates from you. They are optically just crystal freaking clear. It's insane. And you want to maybe talk a little bit about how you happened upon pouring Gellan gum, some of the struggles, high actyl, low actyl. I know there are a few people I know who pour it for themselves. For the most part, I probably recommend most people, even if you've poured your own plates, at least buy like a dry mix or just buy the plates from him. And then maybe talk a little bit about the application for it.
So I was looking at different gelling agents. Some of those would be like, can you use Jello, which is gelatin, which, you can use that as a media, but there's concern about it breaking down the gelatin, so it turning nasty into slush. And then there was other gelling agents that I could use, but you couldn't use them 100%. So like methyl cellulose is a gel, guar gum is a gel. However, they do not lock into a matrix. So if you invert them or turn them on their side, all the gel would run. However, if you did them as a mix with agar, then you could. So you can actually, cut your agar in half by using half the rate methyl cellulose or half the rate guar gum or half the rate xanthan gum or half the rate, any of these other gels are readily can incorporate with agar, so you can cut it in half. When I was looking at gelling gum, there's a ton of literature out there. I think it's even in the Stamets book, which is like the third time I mentioned it. But, if you read through that and understood everything that's going on, he has just these little like insights. That's all I'm grabbing these little tiny blips of things he says. He said, like, some people use gelling gum. And I'm like, what is that? And, I asked my advisor. He's like, oh, I've got some here on the counter, from 1986 from our supply stuff in the lab. And it's all hard and everything. And I tried it. It worked great. Trying to do the online research, going to Shroomery, it's like there was like 3 posts about it, and basically the consensus was like, I tried it, some of them got it to work, some didn't, but overall it was too soft and you weren't going to be able to use it for anything. So I bought a large amount from a company and I couldn't get it to work. I called and they're like, oh, well, you can talk to our scientist and do all that. He'll tell you how to make it work. And I don't think they've ever used it because they couldn't tell me how to make it work.
Right.
But they sold the stuff. So I had to look at a bunch of papers and try a bunch of different ways to use it till finally I got it where it worked. And then I started making posts about it. which all ended back up on the Shroomery. It's like, hey, this guy on Etsy's doing this. We can't say him by name because he's not paying for Shroomery, not affiliated. But the original post says like, hey, I got it to work, and these are crystal clear, and these are cool. And then people started doing it after that, understanding how to make it work. But you can adjust the strength of it just like with Agar. So if you pump up your grams per liter, you can make it as hard as you want. Right? There is no, oh, it's too soft. Well, use more, throw more in there. Right. And that was another thing where I kind of got this idea. It's the minerals that are making it set. Is that if I use sorghum syrup, it would set on me in the water baths. So it leads me to believe that there is a higher mineral content, because if you pump up more minerals, it's going to set at higher temperatures. Also, if you use more of it, it's going to set at higher temperatures.
I see.
Agar's not really doing that. So Gellan gum is weird that its set temperature is dependent on the minerals, the amount that you use. So it's a little finicky, a little weird. Also, if you use too much minerals, it's not clear. So you have to use just the right amount.
Okay, because I can't remember if I ever bought Gellan plates, but I bought a dry mix from you, and I didn't have to do it. I don't remember doing anything different. I just did all the same stuff. So that's in the formulation of what you're putting in it. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I've found about like 4 or 5 different things that work. And then based on what has the best growth is what I basically stick to.
Gotcha.
And, this is too where we can get to water. Talking about water is that if you're using well water and you're using my product and stuff's coming out cloudy, it's because you have a really high mineral content in your water to start off with. So your water is important. People say water doesn't matter. Water can affect all kinds of things. It can affect how your stuff gels. You don't know what's in it. So from a stricter
well, hold on. Before you go past there, didn't you? So when you moved from eastern Michigan to central Michigan, you had a water issue, right? Like your water was coming from somewhere else. I remember you mentioning something about that.
So in northeastern Michigan, where we were at, we're surrounded by gypsum mines, and so if I'm using well water, basically, if you leave water in a cup, it's got a line where it's got like all the minerals. So I had to adjust and add 8 grams of acid per liter just to get my stuff back down to around, 5.5 pH is where I like it.
Okay.
And also that makes all the minerals go away. So when you pour the media, if you don't adjust it, it's going to be really cloudy and full of bits. But if you acidify it, those all become soluble and they go into solution, and then you can have clear media even though you have a high mineral content in your water. But it also means, like with things with Gellan gum, like I don't have to add minerals. Like the water coming out of the ground just works. So like from a scientific point, everybody talks about, like in all these recipes, if you look online, it says 500 milliliters of distilled H2O or whatever, DH2O. And you see that, and that's because, if you're trying to replicate an experiment, do anything, if everybody's at the same starting place, that's why we use distilled. If me and you are using distilled, we're trying to get the same results. We're trying to have the same plates every time, because if you're doing well water, your water could be different seasonally. You not have an issue.
Yeah.
If you're using city water, I've lived in the city before where every 3 months they send you letters, hey, don't drink the water between this week and this week because we're going to treat it. And I've made plates in that period, and guess what? Those plates wouldn't even grow contaminants, because whatever they put in there to treat the water at low high level wouldn't grow mycelium, wouldn't grow contaminants. It was just inert. So that's another problem you can have with water. So, people that haven't had problems with water, they just haven't had bad water. So you could do, if you wanted to, just do spring water. I mean, that would be fine, but as long as you're using the same every time and it's pretty standardized, distill is just, you're not going to get more standardized. Like your spring water could even change. So I started doing those, and now it became popular for a couple years. I think it's kind of waned off again. People aren't really using the Gellan gum as much. But if you want something that's optically clear, if you want something where you can adjust it, like I can do soft or a hard media, which I recommend soft for spore germination.
That's what I originally bought it from you for, was for that, and it works like a charm.
The difference is, like Agar, if you take a plate and squish it with your finger, I mean, it's kind of tacky and tough and almost gets a scale on the top, whereas the Gellan gum keeps more of like a gelatin surface where it feels wetter to your touch, that helps with the spore germination instead of you having to add like hydrogen peroxide or distilled water or
Right.
something to kind of force the germination to happen.
Yeah, the gel and gum plates, I got your wet mix works fantastic for spore germination for sure. Now, the other reason that I might be inclined to want to use it would be if I'm using a microscope and I want to be able to really see through my plates. If I want to do a thin pour, gel and gum is going to give me a really clear plate so that I can look at hyphal tips, you know, on leading edge growth, stuff like that. It also would be good for if I wanted to do a transfer onto it from a plate. I thought maybe there was some contamination, but it wasn't overtly, you know, it wasn't super obvious. I could see that being a good reason to use it. Other than that, I can definitely get regular plates pretty clear enough for just growing mycelium, but I think it's important for people to know it is an option. It's something they can use for that right situation for sure.
I mean,
yeah, you just got everybody excited in the beginning, man. It's, you know,
you can
they
look
just,
through a tube of them, and it's like looking through a kaleidoscope.
oh yeah,
You can't do that
entire
with
stack you can look through. Yes, it is unbelievably clear.
And
Okay,
there's some other differences too. So when I pour gel and gum, I tend to pour much taller stacks and put less per plate. And the reason is the meniscus for the gel and gum
higher.
tends to be like this.
Yeah.
So you feel like you have more in the plate, whereas agar, the meniscus is like this.
Yeah.
And so you don't, it's weird that's one of the differences I notice when I pour them. And I can only get about 30 plates in my vertical flow for the bottom of my bottle is touching the filter. I'm trying to like jostle it to get the last plate in.
That's funny. Yeah, they're, I mean, if you've never used them, they're worth checking out just so you understand what they're like, why they might be useful. I think anybody with a scope should have access to some of it. You might find it become a part of your workflow for sure.
And
all right, so
the PDYG, so the potato dextrose yeast gellan, I think that performs better with gellan, and then the malt yeast agar performs better with agar. So I think the gel does affect how the nutrient media profile performance is.
interesting.
And I can make crystal clear malt ones now because I do have a malt infusion, which is fully soluble and a lot cleaner than malt extract. So I do have some good results. So it is possible that I can start doing the malt gellan again. That'll have just as good results as the potato.
Interesting. Oh, but dude, those PDYG plates those are absolute performers. Those are great plates. Okay, so we've talked about sorghum. You brought that to the table. You brought gel and gum to the table. I'll tell you what I want to talk about because I don't really talk about this one. This might be the first time I've ever publicly talked about this. But these guys right here, they don't look like much. I'll pull one out, then it really won't look like much. It's just a little. Let's try to grab. It's too optically clear. That doesn't work. Anyway, it's a little shrink wrap band, and you were the one who I learned this from. They're super cheap. If you buy them in 1,000 or 5,000 quantities, they're insanely cheap. And I stopped using parafilm. I stopped using cling wrap. I stopped, using grafting tape. I've used all those things. In fact, the last time I was at your place, I picked up some grafting tape from you guys, but I kept finding myself not using it because these shrink wrap bands are just too easy. And they're clean. They look amazing. If I drop a plate, it doesn't come unraveled. I mean, it's on. And it takes literally 2 seconds. I turn my heat gun on. It sits on my table. And I just put the band on, boom, boom, boom. It is hands down the cheapest, fastest way to wrap plates, in my opinion.
Right. So in the beginning, when I was doing pre-pour plates, traditionally people would just put, plates in a stack, put it back in the bag it came from, ship them.
Right.
I was having issues. I was worried about contam because as you're shipping something, those plates are basically bouncing in transit. They're almost like an accordion where it's like air in, air out, air in, and out. And I was feeling like that was the cause of contam.
Right.
So then we were individually wrapping every single plate with paraffin. And so what I would do, I'd buy 10 rolls of paraffin, sit there and cut it into 2-inch sections, 2-inch sections, 2-inch sections. So I'd have these huge stacks of paraffin. And then you take each plate, you put it on, you peel the paraffin, you put it on, you'd wrap it, go around twice at least, and do another one, do another one. So there were some issues. One is you had lab confetti that would just like get into everything and blow around the room from the peeling the paraffin. Two, paraffin, I was having consistency problems. Sometimes it'd be really thick. Sometimes it'd be you pull it, it'd break every 5 seconds.
Depending upon where you are on the roll too. The beginning of the roll and the end of the roll works different than the middle of the roll.
Getting more expensive. People claim that it's sterile, and they don't realize that it's not a sterile product. It was like, oh, well, it's sterile. It's not. And the outside of your dish isn't sterile because you just poured it and touched everything. So what are we talking about here? So then I was having issues. I was wrapping every single one, stacking them, putting them there, and they'd get in the mail, and they'd be like, oh, can you do something? Because these are stuck together. So they're sitting there trying to pull paraffin plates. So it's like, do I just wrap it just enough where it doesn't touch the tops and the bottoms? And so then I came up with the idea. I was buying wax hamburger patty separators. So with every stack of dishes, I would put a paraffin dish and a wax separator dish, wax separator like that, and they'd come. It worked great, but it was a lot. And I was making tinctures and extracts like a lot of people do when they get into mushrooms, and I was using those heat shrink bands. I was like, I bet these would work for the plate.
Dude, I love that. So you were using the little bands for your little tincture bottles and just said, I wonder how big these come.
Right.
Nice.
So I had to order like them 2 or 3 times to get the size that I like. So the conditions for the size I like is it fits on there. It's not too hard to get on, but it stays on readily without me having to fight it. So I got the size that just barely kisses it. I spin it around with one hand, and I even got where I just keep my heat gun on straight up, and just one hand I can sit there and do this all day. And I was sitting there and shrinking everything. And then people are like, oh, well, it has holes in the perforations and it's going to cause contaminants. Like, well, normally plates were shipped without even anything. Like
come
one
on.
hole, there's no air flow. Like it's a singular hole in one side of the dish. There's not like, where's it going to go? It's just abruptly stopped. I was like, well, it doesn't seal completely. It's not a, really clean seal. It's just plastic on plastic. And I was like, well, there's nothing getting in the dish. I've tried it. I've tested it. And then other vendors like, well,
I've gone through 7,000 bands, and I can assure you that those are just trolls giving you a hard time.
Yeah.
This thing works flawlessly.
I mean, there was people cautious about it because, like, well, I don't know about having a heat gun in my flow hood blowing everything around. I was like, well, it is a flow hood. There are things that it blows in there.
It literally blows. Yeah.
And then the sterility issue. So a lot of these times, these plastics that are being produced, they're being heated extreme temperatures, they're being extruded, they're being sealed. So like a lot of things that come that you use, like let's use K-cups for an example, which is ketchup cups that people do, easy pours, no pours. They're pretty clean. They're not completely sterile, but there is a difference between sterile, clean, dirty, and just filthy. These are different like levels.
There's also the category goddamn almost sterile.
Yeah.
Which I think K-cups in these bands are definitely, or Ziploc bags. You never opened a Ziploc bag before. When you open it up, there's nothing in there.
Or aluminum foil.
Yeah, all the paper towels, all that stuff. Odds are there's no bacteria or contamination on there.
Even if there is bacteria, like I'm not worried about it. The reason being is we're talking about motile. Things that
modal bacteria, yes, not a lot of them
travel into the dish up and over, and those things are not going to be present. And so I was doing all this work, but basically I'm labeling every dish. I'm doing all these custom pours. I'm sealing every single one. And so then I came up with the idea, well, what if I just seal the entire stack together, right?
Yeah.
So I started buying the 6-inch, 250-foot roll, and then cutting those to size. And so now I just seal it. One 7-inch long, 6-inch wide heat shrink thing, and it just seals it all together.
Right.
And that keeps everything clean, keeps it from according out, keeps everything tight, keeps it packaged really nice. And I still have some complaints. People are like, oh, I opened it and they just like rolled everywhere. I was like,
Be careful.
A tube of Mentos before? Is like, did you have
Be careful, guys.
Like a tube of anything that comes like that? Like,
I mean, but dude, there's probably
one at a time.
There's probably people writing letters to Nike going, I bought these shoes, I can't get them tied. When are you going to come teach me how to tie my own shoes? Right? I mean, it's customer service. There's always going to be somebody who, because they had some bad experience that they screwed up, going to try to make it your fault. And good on you for, being an attentive vendor and trying to improve that situation. But at the end of the day, I can assure you, having bought a lot of plates from a lot of people, poured a lot of plates, used a lot of sealing devices, I don't think there's anything better.
So this is basically where we're at now for the packaging. We have corrugated wrap.
Pro.
And then these is a banding machine that just seals everything, because before it was just tape. But I found people like this better because they can literally just sit there and tear it off. They don't have to find scissors for the tape.
Yep.
So you tear it off, take off your cardboard. So this does two things. One is it protects it from being damaged. The other is it acts as an insulator. So when you take this out, you're not having that condensation because you're not having these temperature changes.
Yep. Oh yeah, dude. There's no condensation on your plates. I already know.
So everything's tight, and then everything's clean until you're ready to use it. And I would just use the scalpel and cut one out at a time if you only want to use one.
Yep.
And
that's what I did.
From people that like, hey, can I just buy 3 plates from you? I mean, a lot of people are very hesitant to buy more than a few plates. But I mean, if you're doing any kind of work, cloning and multiplying out, like, you're going to need some plates. 3 plates is like, if you're just germinating something, just
to me, 10 would be a ridiculously low number of plates to order.
Yeah.
Yeah. So by the way, guys, the packaging is just unbelievably on point. They're never cracked. They're never condensated. That he showed you that pack, you undo the Ziploc bag and then you pull out it shrink wrap sleeve. If you're only going to use them one at a time, which that's never me, but if you are, like you said, you could take a scalpel and just cut around and take the top one off and you're good. Or you could, if you had a flow hood, you could take them all out and use as many as you're going to use and then put the rest back in the bag. There's a bunch of options. But boy, if you had some of these and a $9.98 heat gun from Harbor Freight, whatever you didn't use, you could just seal them back up. You'd be good to go.
Yeah, you have to look way back on my Instagram to find those. I know a lot of people were requesting, hey, what was the link? What was the link for those? And then I did a video. It was like on the mushroom growing group, and
I'll put it in the description. I'll put the link for the 100 millimeter plates and the 60. I don't do 90s. 90s might have to figure out. You might have to DM Tim. He might know what the 90s are. But
it got so much hate. People say it wouldn't work, and they're like, "That's why parafilm was invented." And why are you doing this? And they're like, "Oh, I could wrap parafilm. I'd be done with the whole stack by the time."
You can't. I timed it. I did it. It's not faster.
It's
bullshit.
Not, and you have to include cutting the parafilm. Like, oh, I
got to include all of it. Yeah, when you include all of it, it's a no contest. Yes, it's no contest.
Looks clean, doesn't stick together.
And like I said, let me see what I paid for these. I just bought this pack not too long ago.
When I was in production, I was buying those. I think the biggest one they had was like the 20,000 pack, and I was just buying oodles of them.
Let's see.
I know I went through at least 2 heat guns.
Oh, sorry. They're not called shrink wrap. I think they're called shrink bands.
Yeah.
Here we go. So we'll do the math. So I bought a pack of 1,000 for $24. Right? So, because I'm not going to get my math wrong on
2.4 cents each. Is that right?
2 cents, 2.5 cents a piece. Do the math on the parafilm these days. Do the math on any of the other stuff. Even a $10 roll of grafting tape, if you do the math on how much you're using per one and you actually figure it out, it's right there. And then, man, if you buy the 5,000 pack is, where is it here? That's $100. So that's a cent. By the 5,000 pack, this thing is 1 freaking cent.
Yeah, I was buying them in the 20,000 packs, so like I was paying less than a penny for them. But if you really want to go crazy, one of the big problems I had with parafilm was in shipping, it tend to get the edges rubbed, and then what you would have, the parafilm would break.
100%.
And so what I ended up doing was, when I was doing the cultures, was I would wrap with parafilm, and then I would seal it with one of those on the outside. That would protect the parafilm. It wouldn't dry out, and they could say it had a hermetic seal because it had the parafilm underneath.
Right. There you go. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that. I've seen people where they're actually, because the goddamn parafilm's so expensive, they're not only cutting it in the two section tabs, but then they're cutting it lengthwise, and they're not folding it over. And I'm like, oh my God, dude, I fold that over and double wrap it, and still will have plates where the leading edge of the top will cut through it, especially if you press down on it too hard. You think you're good because you wrapped it, but you wrapped it cheap, and now you're stuck. You got a whole, literally, I've had plates where I'm like, oh my God, half this whole thing is torn apart. Total air exchange in there. You just got to pay attention. But anyway, love these. So sorghum syrup, Gellan gum, shrink wrap. But there's one more, Tim, my favorite. And this is when I was growing a bunch of gourmets for a while. You had a post about wet box tech. And I love this one. This is super off the radar. I don't even know if you can look this one up on Shroomery or not. Maybe you can. But you had this idea. Just tell people about it, how it came about. I think it's really smart. And I think just the concept behind it could be applied in a lot of ways.
Right. So when we were looking at using recyclable materials or trying to minimize plastic waste, one of the things that I was saying is like, why can't we just sterilize a cardboard box with a substrate in it and then use that to grow? But nobody liked that idea, and you'd have to have cardboard be able to withstand like being wet coming out of the autoclave and all that. But I was like, but you could do little wooden boxes that like it would just grow in the box and it could consume the wood when it's done and everything. Well, it'd be expensive, and it's just plastic's so cheap. So with the grow bins, I had the house we were staying in was like 20% humidity, like because we were
bone dry,
wood floors, wood paneling walls, gas heat just running all the time, just suck. You crack face and lips when you wake up in the morning.
Right.
And I got a whole house humidifier. It's supposed to be good enough for the whole house. I'd have to fill it up daily, and it would only get me up to like 40%, and that was like it holds like 2 giant 10-gallon jugs, and it would just empty it. But I wanted to do like lion's mane and stuff in the winter because like I like to crack the window and keep it a little cool, and like it was a Michigan strain that we cloned at the Camp Compost, which is in northwestern Michigan, and I just couldn't keep the humidity up, and I didn't want to do a Martha. I don't like the idea of a bunch of the plastics, and then like you got pooling water, and you have to wipe down all your walls, and like if you do have extra condensation, you got to have to like collect it at the bottom of your Martha, and not
work. It's definitely work. Yes.
So I was like, well, I'll just make a humidity chamber. I'll just get a box that's bigger than my grow block. So I had like a 5 or 10 pound Masters Mix block with lion's mane on it, and I'll just set it over top of it. But the tabs I left on, so like the box still had the flaps. They were just straight. And because they were sitting on that, you ended up having 4 corners that had just like a slit where air could like have some air exchange, so not completely choking it off. And it was sitting on the counter, so I didn't have to worry about like water and stuff getting on the counter. And so in the morning, I would just take the box over to the sink and spray it with my little sprayer and sweat everything down inside, strip off any extra, and put it over top of the block. And then by that evening, before I go to bed, the box would be bone dry, and I would just spray it down again and do that, and I would just keep repeating that. And it was like the perfect amount of moisture. You weren't growing mold and stuff on the cardboard because it was drying between cycles. Like it's getting this dry period. And if you ever did have issues, like I'll just switch out the box. You know what I'm saying? Right. And so it was a really easy way to do like small scale growing gourmets on the counter without having to invest in something, or like having to do like some people do like a plastic dome and they'll like sit in there and spray up in there, and like they're looking at the way that the water's beating up to tell how much humidity and stuff. But with the cardboard, it's releasing it back. I think that
Yeah,
it's more
because there's some movement between the cardboard air movement. I think that's what makes it work better, because I've done both. I've done the, what to do with your mono tub when you're not growing fruit in it. You can just flip it upside down, spray the inside. It does not work as well as the box tech. When you get that box not soaked, but
yeah,
very wet on the inside,
yeah,
like you said, shake it off and you put it in there. Now the real benefit though is because a lot of people buy these, their first foray into growing mushrooms. They buy an all-in-one kit. It's a colonized, gourmet block. They cut their slits. They get told just mist it once in a while. And they find, and some people be like, oh yeah, works great. I grew, here's the flush I grew. Now, I don't know if they grew that flush or not. Every flush I grew on my kitchen counter, it made fruit, but it wasn't sexy. But
yeah.
in that box tech, that wet box tech, it's
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, the
I was
fruit
growing
looks nice.
monster lions, man. It looked really
Yeah.
good. And to me, it's similar like if you've ever gone in the wild and picked them out of like the holler of a tree,
Yep.
or at like dank, rotten wood on the bottom, and it's just like wet. Like if you crawled in there, you could just feel it's like this
Yep.
wetness that descends
Yep.
upon you. It's like that perfect environment. So like for small scale, I think it's perfect. And your box really doesn't lose form or lose shape. It's just wetting the
Right.
inside corrugated,
Yep.
so the outside still keeps its structure. And so you can use it for a while before like, all right, well, this one's done. Let me start over and
Yep.
try another one.
Yeah, and for me, when I did it, it was not 19% humidity in my house, which that's what my basement is in the winter for sure. But I had it was sitting at about 38% humidity, and I only did it once a day, and
Mhm.
it was fine. Maybe there were some nights where I was like, I could hit this again, but yeah, I could usually go 24 hours and
I
be
would let it
good.
dry out completely, definitely. And I think, as far as like with the pans, people are noticing that, mushrooms do like this cyclical nature of things. Like you can get,
Yeah,
grow things that maybe you couldn't before because you're, creating, these extremes in the environment that would
yep,
naturally occur. You got sunrise, you got things evaporating, you got the
yep,
moon, you got condensation coming. You know what I'm saying? You got differences in temperature. That's why I like a lot of
yes,
times I'll put stuff by a cracked window like my enoki. That's a wild clone. It really likes to be in the winter, by the window, keep it cracked. It's got a little breeze that comes in sometimes, and it just performs really well.
yep,
But if you get it above 70 degrees, it's not happy about it because you pick it like
right,
it's February.
right. Oh yeah, chilly. It likes it a little chilly for sure. Um, all right. Well, we hit all your texts. I wanted to make sure everybody knew all the cool texts that you brought to the table. It's interesting because in every one of these stories, I'm hearing two things. I'm hearing, the science background you have, but more importantly, honestly, a lot of the stuff I think still goes back to that physics engineering mindset that I think you have, that you are bringing to the table, whether that's what the degree, you didn't get that degree, but you still got enough training in it where you still think of the physics of things a lot. Dude, I'm telling you, when you just said the thing about condensation in plates and they're sitting on their side during shipment, and it's falling down and going out of the plate, and that's where it's grabbing that bacteria and moving it back into the plate. I'm like, yeah, only a physics guy is going to think about this. This is exactly how that's happening. So I think that's great. I think that makes you special and unique. It definitely makes you an amazing plate vendor. And you're still, coming up with new stuff all the time. I know Ooh, well, before we get into that, how about we talk about you moved not too long ago. I don't know, maybe it's been a while now, but you moved from Eastern Michigan to Central Michigan, and you are now, I guess, if anybody's really paid attention, they got a clue in your backdrop there, because there's a bunch of Micropos boxes. You are now working side by side with Dan Rogers of Micropos. Tell me a little bit about how that relationship came about and how that's been going for you.
I think when I first started, Dan had put his filters on Instagram. He barely had any followers. I was like, hey man, these are cool. And I wanted to order a whole bunch from him, and I started using those. And then I basically, kept up with what he's been doing since then, and talked to him on a regular basis. Um, when I was up further north, and then things were kind of slow. I also wanted to get everything out of the house. I wanted to get to a new house because, you know, I could take up 2 rooms just with my packaging material, like
Right.
plus all of my, I'm buying Agar 50 kilos at a time, buying dextrose 50 kilos at a time. So like, I really needed some space. And I said, hey, let's work together. I want to come work for you at your place, and I also want to be able to do my business stuff. So everything is here.
Because he had just got a new space as well, right?
Yeah, he got a space, and he wasn't really utilizing it to its full potential yet, and we still aren't. But we're already looking for a bigger space. But I came basically July last year, so I've been here a year at this point.
Nice.
And I mean, we've already, Micropos has come out with new products. There's new stuff in the works. There's stuff that I couldn't talk about that I could talk about now, and there's things that I still can't talk about as far as different products and different ideas that are trying to come to fruition. So it's just we definitely work together. If you get products from him, it's me packing and shipping his stuff because that's one of the things that I kind of like focused on my own business. So he trusts me to pack and ship all the stuff for him.
Yeah,
so
man. If you can pack that white chicken of the woods, and get it to people in other states, you're a packing master for sure. I've seen your setup. Yeah, you're dialed. I mean, everything you do is top notch, A plus. If someone's complaining, I don't know how on earth they are. I mean, yeah, you're doing it all right. And that's cool. I think you and Dan are similar, and you're both always thinking about this is a growing industry. This is an industry that's primarily made up of hodgepodging a lot of things together, which it works. I'm not knocking hodgepodging anything, but I'm also definitely not knocking two guys who are running a business who are saying, I think we can meet the needs of this community in a way that's not being met yet. A great example would be Dan's filter patches are superior to all the other filter patches. They just are. They're just better. You guys have been talking to me about your grow tubs, and now you guys finally let the cat out of the bag about those. Cannot wait to be trying those out. They look really nice. I have physically touched one and played with one. I can tell you they are built superiorly to max yield bins. Sorry, max yield bins. You're just gonna have to make a new mold or something like that, because they don't arrive bowed or warped or anything like that. And you can, God, have you done like a test on how much weight you can set on them before they cave in?
So
It's got to be. I bet it's almost
came in
100 pounds.
yesterday. These are the small, tiny hobby sizes. These are 1
Yep.
foot by 1 foot cubes. So, me and Dan both stood on the medium size and the large size. So that's right at 360 pounds.
Dude,
and held up.
yeah.
I think we posted that video on his Instagram.
Okay. I did not catch it, but yeah, I could just, when I touched it, I was like, okay. And the other thing that is amazing, and we'll have Dan on, we'll talk about it, but the max yield bin, I got it, and it was the thing that I was like, how on earth did they do this? Is the bottom is wider than the top. So the top actually sits inside and does create like a little potential slot where contamination could fall into it.
Right.
And I saw yours and I was like, oh, of course, they're smart. They didn't do that. They made that wrap around the top of the bottom of the.
Right. Yeah, when we were dealing with the designer, we had the channel created. So basically, it would have to go up, over, and then down. But also, you have your liner that's going to be pinched here. So it's going to be tight. You're not going to have air just traveling along there.
Right. Sorry, I'm responding to something real quick. All right. Yeah, dude. So I just love it. we've talked about there's been a couple people that are just really on this, like, don't buy anything from any company that cares enough about the community to run a business around it. Do it all yourself, buy everything from the dollar store and this, that, and the other thing. And I'm just like, man, I see it the complete opposite way. A sign of a growing community or industry or area of interest, whatever you want to call it, is how much industry assembles around it. And so seeing you guys, pouring plates seriously, trying to product develop, coming up with innovative ways of new techs and new approaches, new materials that can be used. I mean, I thank you guys for being here and doing that kind of stuff. We need more people like you doing that. So kudos to you. I'm glad that relationship's working out. I saw the space. You are definitely underutilizing it, but I'm all about you guys getting a bigger space. I think it just gives you a bigger palette to work from and more options and all that. So I think that's wonderful. So you're still pouring plates. You're working with Dan. What you got any projects you can talk about that I don't know about? I know I was just over there, so.
Yeah, I don't know that I can talk about any of his stuff. Right now, we're discussing, for me, probably getting back into doing the cultures. Like originally, when I had first started selling on Etsy, I was doing a lot of the wild clonings and selling wild cultures. So now that I have a little bit more time, I might break those out, start doing some more, exotic grows as far as things people don't typically grow.
I think that'd be awesome.
And then I've also got the time lapse stuff set up, so I've been playing around with that. So I want to do some atypical time lapse stuff.
Man, Tim, please do more plate time lapses. I cannot get enough of watching mycelium colonize a plate. I think that would be very cool. Yeah, man, Ashley Enders, Boomer Shroomer, she happened on, I don't know where she got the idea to do time lapse, but it was definitely a good call. No one gets sick of watching mushrooms grow.
Yeah.
No one gets sick of it. So that would be very exciting.
Every one of her videos gets more likes than my most popular video.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if you saw her setup. She showed a video where she had basically like 12 of these things along one wall, all going at the same time.
Yeah.
So I've got the one GoPro that I'm trying to mess around with now, and I've got it where I can hook it up to these tubs and shoot right through the side and be able to get some good content.
That's great.
It's like more stuff that's dedicated space. I have a light running all the time with it. I've got to have power. I've got to make sure this stays on. Tape the light switches so I accidentally turned on the light and messes up my time lapse. And it's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, you got to set it up. Yeah, you got to take it seriously. It's definitely a process. I remember seeing a post of hers. She was talking about new lens she bought. I want to say it was like $3,000 or at least $1,500, and it was a regular lens, but then it like went down into this thin tube, so she only had to get like a little tube into the tub. I don't know if that's what she still uses or not, but yeah, you got to put some thought into all this. All those like fancy pictures Alan Rockefeller posts. It takes special camera, it takes work, post-production work, all this media that we're devouring, it takes people work to do it. So people got to figure out how to make money. The cameras cost money, the lenses cost money, it all costs money. So I think you're probably really smart. I know people love genetics. I don't care what you sell. In our community, genetics rule. That's the number one thing people are definitely buying from other people is genetics. So
yep, I did well in the beginning. When I first started Etsy and I was selling everything. I was selling 8 different types of grain bags. I was selling the dry mixes, the genetics, like everything. But then like as plates became bigger and bigger and bigger on those production levels, like I can't unless I have more help. Like literally, I just have to pick one thing.
Yeah.
Just do plates because like I didn't have time. I had one fridge that was just dedicated to cultures and all that. And it's like every time somebody ordered a culture, I have to go and like find that one and put a needle with it and put it in its own bag and label it and do all that. Whereas, or if you just do one thing, like big, then you don't have like you're not chasing yourself all around the house trying to put all these different elements together.
I mean, it's like In-N-Out Burger, right? What do they sell? They sell burgers and fries. That's what they sell. That's all they do. But their burgers and fries are better than McDonald's, better than all the others. They just keep that menu small. I think that's good advice in general for people who do want to be a vendor is, man, out of the gate, you're not running a full scale mycology supply warehouse. Why don't you just pick a thing, start there, right? Like start small, do it well, slowly grow. That's probably the smart way to do it. Yeah. Anyway, so I think let me look at my notes here. I think we hit all the topics. Anything that you want to talk about that we have not already talked about? Oh, I got one. Let's talk about your logo. And I also want to pull up another sticker. So tell us a little bit about who did your logo, and then I'm going to pull up the sticker that you just had done that I think is very cool.
So when I was going to East Carolina University to get my degree, I was doing a delivery driver job at night. So basically, I would do the early classes. I would get out, and then like at 5 or 6, I would go into work, and I'd drive till like 2 or 3 in the morning, and then I'd get up at 8, go to class, and I would just do that constantly for the 2 years that I was there. And I delivered to one guy, and then like somebody has a picture of a mushroom poster in the background or says anything that like if they want to spark up the conversation about mushrooms, I'm fully willing to go down and talk
Right.
about that kind of stuff. So I was delivering food to them, and I was telling him about how I do, like I'm certified to pick wild mushrooms. I sell wild mushrooms, and I sell mushrooms at the market and everything. So he was an artist, and it turned out that the farmers market that I sell at, there's this giant mural, and that was his mural that he had done. And I told him, like I wanted to get like a logo done and everything, and he just like hand drew this little logo, which was this first one I got done, and that was just like a little notebook sketch. He sold me for like $50. And then later I was like, hey, can you colorize it? I want to do more stuff with it. And then he gave me this logo here. And then, I had this one, which was on his IG, and I asked him if I could buy it, like just to do some stickers. And so he sold this one to
Oh
me.
yeah, dude, that
So
sticker is so rad. I love that sticker.
I've been eyeballing it for like 3 or 4 years. He wouldn't sell it to me, wouldn't sell it to me. I was like, well, just let me pay you to be able to like make stickers of it, because I just want to
Right.
distribute it, basically. So yeah, Vincent Lee is IG is on the back of the stickers. I put that on there. So
Nice. Well, we'll get it in the description too, so that'll be there.
Yeah, he's really cool. He was down there in Greenville, North Carolina, where I was, and then Mr. Beast. A lot of his videos were in that same first video where he was just like young, and we're in that same market square like that he was doing with a home recorder and everything, because he was right down the street from where we were.
Oh, wow.
And I think he ended up moving. Vince moved to Washington State. So he's out there now and just got his tattoo certifications. He does like tattoos and stuff now. But yeah, he's a illustrator. On his IG, if you check out his work, it's a lot of like illustrative design. It's like this early stuff, and that's kind of stuff I like, because it's like, to me, it's more expressive, like art, but like easy to read, and like just cool, like good for logos for sure.
I mean, it's one of my favorite logos. Also, your black and white shirt is like one of my favorite mushroom shirts.
He also did the boar logo for me, which I don't have an example, but
what's that? Bora.
The boar. It's like the guy, right?
Oh yeah. Where is that? Oh, so also, guys, by the way, speaking of, you guys know it's all about the slap game, right? So you gotta keep the slap game tight, and Tim is definitely doing that.
Yeah.
He just had these. He's got. Okay, there we go. Real deal. That's a nice sticker.
Yeah, I thought
buy some plates from him. You'll probably get one of those
for like 2 years before I decided to do it, because they are more expensive. But I was like, it just had a cool look to it, and I really wanted it. So
it does. I had one of my rainbow ghosts done with it. It didn't look quite as cool. I think it's a little design dependent, but that design looks fantastic. Yeah, I can't find the boar. You know what you're talking about, but I don't see it. Anyway, so So you have a website, agarnow.com, but you just told me you can also just go to tipofthecapmushrooms.com. It'll redirect you there as well.
Yeah.
And then you still maintain the Etsy, right?
Yeah, so most of my stuff is still done through Etsy, even though Etsy's just changing and like a lot of people are leaving Etsy, but I mean, still a lot of the stuff goes through Etsy. I mean, it used to be, you know, like a boutique type deal. Now it's pretty much like any type of merchandise you want. They want to be like
Yeah.
Amazon. They got taken over and they take more of what you earn, and it's really corporate now.
Yeah, everybody wants to give me a hard time for being a few bucks more on my sterilizers than everybody else. And I'm like, I'm the only guy on Etsy. It's guaranteed $250 buyer protection. Like you're protected, I'm protected. Their whole star seller program basically guarantees I don't screw anything up ever. You get what you're supposed to get in the promised time, blah blah blah. And but they take 10%. I mean, I think it's pretty close to 10% of my money. So gotta, you gotta pay for that. If you want to do like some shady alley stuff, sure, we can save you some money. We can do it that way. But a lot of people are find me. They don't watch the podcast. They're not on my Instagram. I do a fair amount of sales just from people searching scalpel sterilizers and they, just look at all the options and buy mine. So great, cool. I'm sure the same happens for you where they're not like following you on Instagram. They just go, wow, this he's a star seller and he sold 15,000 sales on Etsy. Like, okay, he probably knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like Amazon used to be really big. I used to do a lot of my sales on there, but that's really dropped off. eBay, and then back in the day it was like what was everybody using? It wasn't Pinterest. It was like Reddit.
Right.
But you quickly had to move away from that. You lose your mind. Like, oh, what's your address? And is that a street? What? And then writing all that down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Buying shipping individually for that and figuring out how much they would have to pay you for shipping. Like you have to streamline that
and collecting the addresses and all that stuff. I mean, for the Etsy, they got verified shipping address. I'm neurotic. I still verify everything because I'm shipping a several $100 item. I make sure that they inputted the right address, and I click one couple buttons, and I got my thing printed off, and it's as competitive as Shippo or any of those other places. So
it's even cheaper now.
Yeah.
Etsy's gotten some really great rates, and they said that in the beginning of the year they're going to get rid of first class package. USPS, everything's going to change. They're getting rid of first class package, and it's just becoming some parcel thing. And
like they're getting their own proprietary designation. Or?
USPS is getting rid of it.
Oh,
so
USPS.
You don't buy at the post office either.
I see.
And they're doing some other type, and also priority is supposed to be even cheaper on Etsy, which is already sometimes priority is only like $6 on Etsy.
Yeah, it can be good for small packages. Yeah. Yep. I don't ship anything not priority. It's tracked, it's priority. I think I've done a little over 400 I mean, I'm sure you've done thousands and thousands of shipments, but of my 400 shipments plus shipments I've done, I've only had one where the guy never got it. And the guy had a camera on his front porch, verified, through his camera that no one ever delivered anything to him, but the post person said it was delivered. And so both he and I tried to fight them on it, like saying, look, man, he's got the freaking video footage saying that on that day, not a single human being walked up on his porch. They wouldn't give him any money back. So luckily I insure everything. So, I got I got the money back. I of course sent him another sterilizer right away. But that's what I like, because I don't like dealing with those headaches of you didn't get it. Now I got it because I'm a good guy. So I'm going to send you another one. And yeah. Well, I'm curious, what are your rates of lost packages?
I have so my Shopify about 6 months ago, somebody did a chargeback for like 120 plates. They're in Alaska, and then it was like months later, and I know it was a lie. I know it's a scam because I can literally see it that they came back and forth to my site over a period of days and checked it out,
Mm-hmm.
and it went to the address that's for that card, and the bank sided with them. I showed them all the evidence showing, like, they came to the site. This was them visiting it multiple times, not checking out, and then checking out later, and like there was no problems like with the charge or nothing.
Right.
And they were saying that I was scammed, like they never got it or something. But they never contacted me. It just went straight to the bank and then did a charge back on Shopify. So I didn't get the money for that. But other than that, nothing on Shopify, nothing on Etsy. There's people that said that,
awesome.
But
That's great.
most of the time, like you said, they find it. It's like it's at the neighbor's house, or it's under the bush, in front of the porch, or they deliver it the next day. A lot of times they say they delivered it, but they'll just bring it the next day. So
agreed. Yeah, it's pretty minimal. If you use anything tracked and insured, they pretty much want to deliver it. So
the other one I've been starting to do, so I will do the stickers for $2, including shipping. So those I don't tracking because so I put it in an envelope, I put a stamp on it, and then $2 basically.
Nice.
You can get a sticker because a lot of people just want the slaps like for their or their case or whatever.
Yeah, man, and that's I don't do that. I just wait until I'm sending people something anyway, and then I include it in that way. I've had people be like, "Why don't you put your slaps up on Etsy?" And the real reason is I don't like licking envelopes. I'm just lazy. But befriend me and talk to me, and you might get a sticker one way or the other. But yeah. Yeah, man. So that's interesting about that shipping change, and yeah, man, a lot of stuff's changing. I even think Amazon. I have a sneaking suspicion. Amazon's just phenomenal return policies are about to maybe not be quite as phenomenal. I've had a couple things I've returned where it's like, oh, that was a little more difficult than it used to be. I wonder why that is.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been invited to like Discord groups where the whole group is just about, hey, you can get free stuff from all those companies saying you didn't get. Like, that's the entire point of the Discord is like, what company can you rip off easily? This is how you do it. This is how you get free stuff. Hey, I got half my money back. And that's like literally people that just do that for a living. So, I mean, eventually that's going to catch up, to everything as far as returns go.
Oh, I did. I remember I sold it was like a maybe not six, maybe $500 really fancy mountain biking helmet for downhill mountain biking. And I got a good deal on it. So I didn't pay $500 for it. I think I paid $180. It was like a year-end closeout or whatever. And I ordered online. I did all the due diligence to make sure it was the right size. And it was not super comfortable. I only rode it on one ride and I was like, yep, I'm going to have to sell this. So I sold it to this guy on eBay, and I think I sold it for $220. I made a couple bucks off the whole deal. And he claimed he didn't get it. And I'm like, you got that shit. I know you got that. It's all right here. But he fought it with eBay, and long story short, all these companies, whether it's Facebook Marketplace, eBay, Etsy, they're all gonna side by the buyer. They're gonna side with the buyer because at the end of the day, their bread and butter, their whole business model is set up around getting people to come to their sites and buy stuff from them. So, yep, I had to eat that money.
That we talked about the Agar that I bought on Amazon from.
Oh yeah, we forgot about that.
And I got it, and I was like, "Oh, this is pretty good." It was like dirt cheap, and so the way Amazon works is somebody already has a listing for a product, and they don't have their like logo or something that distinctly makes that product theirs on theirs. Then anybody can sell under that listing. So, for example, when I was selling pre-poured, I had other companies like, well, I got 20 pre-poureds, and they were just using my listing. And then the only part that's different is it says sold by. It'll be sold by a different name. You know what I'm saying?
I did not know this. Okay.
So a lot of people were selling mine, and so my Amazon reviews tanked, and I stopped selling as much because I had a lot of bad reviews. They weren't stuff that I was selling because the review is attached to the listing. It's not attached to the person that sold it. So if other people sell that listing and have bad products, it still goes to listing, and that listing just isn't going to do well because
I did not know this.
So this company basically was using listings of products I've already bought before on Amazon of Agar. So when I bought it and it was like dirt cheap, and I tried to use it, the first time I tried to use it, I filled all my bottles up and cooked it. It basically turned into like it looked like Swiss cheese in the bottom of the jar. Like it was a solid mat of what cooked, and then it had like these holes like inside, like cork wood or Swiss cheese or something. And it had like, to me, I think it was like a latexy smell. So to me, I think it was like powdered latex or something that's dirt cheap, something that is very cheap but dry, looks like agar.
Wow.
So it said it was ineligible for a refund. Some products do on Amazon, like when you buy it, it's like
Right.
that. But then I complained, and I had to go through all these like different pages to find like, well, where to request a refund? How do I go about it? Because they don't make it. They make it hard. They make like the first place you go says it's not going to happen. So you
Right.
got to like go to all these like hidden places. And then I complained, said, "Hey, this is fake." And he's like, "Oh, this isn't fake. I've sold to thousands of people. This is real agar. You just don't know how to use it." And I was like, "Buddy, I've used
You're talking to the wrong dude on that one, bud.
literally tons of agar at this point, right? So I know it's not real. It didn't cook right." And after I made the post and was warning people on Instagram, then I had like Mike Tyson popped up. He's like, "Oh yeah, I bought that stuff. They screwed me over too, and I didn't get my money back." And I was like, "Well, I got mine back because I just complained enough and called him enough names until he gave me my money back." But
Nice.
definitely try to go on IG and put the warning out there so people didn't think they were getting a really good deal. They're just getting garbage. Like it's not
Yeah.
agar, and it's very dangerous because most people that are buying agar are probably buying it as a food product, as a gelatin replacement, and so
Right.
somebody ate that, never used it before. It's like, oh, it turned into something, and let me try to eat it, and who knows what it was.
Scary stuff, man. Yeah, people don't think about that. The minute you sell a food product, especially if you're selling a food like
Yeah,
freeze-dried Skittles or something like that on Etsy, let's say, man, you can get your ass sued real fast. Let's say you freeze dry a freaking grilled cheese and it's got some botulism in it or it's got something bad in there and you get real sick. They absolutely can sue you over that. You gotta be careful. Or like, my sterilizer, I make it one way because it's a device that the device does not get hot at all. The device in and of itself does not produce heat. But if you put a scalpel in it, that scalpel gets hot and that does create heat. So I design it a certain way just to keep it as safe as humanly possible because I'm on the line for that. If I made something that could burn your house down and you do burn your house down, you're gonna sue me over that, right? Like how dare he made a product that's not UL listed, blah 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 blah. Fortunately, I tried to burn shit down with it. You can't do it. You got to be so maliciously driven to maybe create the tiniest ember on earth that it's just not going to happen. But these are things people got to think about the minute you want to start doing business in a more formal way. You got to think about that stuff.
yeah. I have people all the time that ask me, "Is like, hey, is your yeast extract edible? Can I use this as a food additive?" Or they'll ask me, "Hey, can I use your agar as like a face mask and things like this?" And no, like I don't. I'm not
No,
condoning
it's
that.
not.
It's like
It's not
my
what I'm
stuff is
selling this for.
for scientific media. Like it might be possible, but I'm not recommending it. I'm not saying you can do that.
Exactly.
Like I don't need like. What's the value to me so I can sell you $15 of yeast extracts for saying you can eat it?
I don't know, man. People are weird. I mean, I didn't even know people were trying to eat agar, unless you're like one
Yeah,
of those culinary dessert makers or something like that, where you're trying to create, I don't know, some form or something. But
yeah. I mean, that's all the stuff that you go to the Asian market. That's all for food use. They buy in
yeah,
this little packet of agar. They're making little treats with it and stuff. But
yummy
yeah,
little
for sure. Like
treats.
we watched The Bear. We finished the last episode last night,
Hmm.
and when they come up with the culinary chefs that are doing like the fine end desserts and stuff, I'm always thinking, yeah, I could do that. I could make
Yeah.
those gel. I could make them pretty. It's like if I did something else, I feel like I could transition and be like, yeah, I've got tons of it. He's like, how do you
Yeah.
have experience with this? And you didn't work in a kitchen or restaurant. I was like, well, I just made a lot of petri dishes.
Well, I just do. Yep. That's cool. Um, All right, dude. I think officially pulling up the bad agar story. I think that hits all the stuff that we were hoping to talk about. I'm so glad we finally got you on the show. It has been way a long time coming. I'd have people message me like, "Hey, have you ever thought about having Tim on?" Yeah, dude. I've been harassing him for pretty much ever since the show started. So,
So
uh,
what? What is this? How long has it been going on now?
Dude, I don't know. I don't know. Let's see. Here, I can tell you pretty quickly. The first video was...
And I wore my PGT Myco Valley collab shirt.
Oh,
today.
yeah. Shout out to PGT, Myco Valley, plushie game tight, genetics game tight, YouTube videos tight, all around. All right, hold on. I'll tell you here. Oldest. Oh, you know what? Here we go. The very first podcast that I did on YouTube was with old Dan Rogers of Micropos, and that was 11 months ago. So we're coming up on getting close to 1 year.
Yeah.
1 year, I don't know, 40 some videos. I missed a few here and there.
Because that's when I first came, and we actually had the green screen and everything set up here, but he didn't use it. He went home and did the podcast.
I think I did that one, and then I think there was actually a pretty good gap of, hold on, let me see what these other ones say. That one was 10 months. Yeah, so I did the one with Dan, and then a month later I did the one with Dave, and then I did hacking breeding mushrooms with Wumbo.
Yeah, I thought about the Dave one today. I went and got one of those whole chickens, roasted chicken.
Oh.
Thinking about him when I was here. I was like, I'm doing a podcast here. I'm eating this chicken.
Yeah. I will never eat raw chicken, ever. I never. Will not happen for me. But I will film him doing it. Yeah, so I think in the beginning, it wasn't every week. I'd have to look back, but I think it's been at least 8 or 9 months where I've been pretty steady. Yeah, we're figuring it out. I think I might be switching platforms here shortly to get a little more consistency. I love StreamYard, but I'm still having issues every time I try to do local recordings, so that I could eventually, the goal would be, instead of this format here where, I'm on the left and you're on the right, I would have the raw video of both feeds, so I could actually, during certain times, if somebody says something really cool, I could have just a full screen shot of them saying whatever they're saying, edit back and forth like that. Not been successful with doing that on StreamYard, but I hear there's, I won't say who yet, but so I'm going to be trying somebody else, see how that goes. Just trying to keep figuring it out, get better at it. Still struggle with the audio. It's so funny. I mean, when I was younger, I had a small recording studio. I worked out of Detroit and recorded, demos and albums for R&B and hip hop singers and rappers, and definitely knew how to do that. But boy, remote guests, it's a little tricky getting the audio to match without doing a lot of post processing, and I don't have the time to do it all. So it's been a struggle, but overall good enough that people are definitely learning stuff from getting to know people like you, and it gives people like you a chance to get a little more exposure and reach more people, that's what I'm trying to do. Just myceliate, bring everybody together in this community, expose people to people they might not have heard about, and it's been good.
Yeah, and I had said on one of my lives that y'all were inspiring me to make my own video, and I still got to get around to it.
I know you will. You got the gear. It's just going to sit there just whispering your name as you're doing your pours late into the evening. It'll just be behind you, just reminding you.
I definitely feel like just an Agar from bottle to dish video would be good. Everything we hit on here, and like simple prep, quick, efficiency, get it in there, get it out, and then I think.
Man, I'm telling you what, you could do an in the lab format. You could just set up a camera. If you want to get slick about it, you could have a multicam setup. That would of course be really slick. But even if you just did short, periodic, half hour to an hour videos where you just shooting the shit with people as you're pouring, people love that, man. I can't tell you how many times I get somebody message me at least once a week where they're like, okay, I watched every one of your videos, sometimes twice. Who else should I be watching? Because people are just devouring content. A lot of people are working long hours in their own labs and they just want stuff to listen to. They want to talk about, right? What we do, it's so lonely. It's
Oh yeah.
we're in our basements, or we're in, like I've been to your place, you know, you're sitting there pouring for hours at a time, and it's not a party, you know, it's definitely a little bit lonelier work. So I think this is a way that this content is serving people, whether you're just going live on Instagram for 15 minutes or you're actually recording and, you know, more formally presenting some content on YouTube, whether you're doing just an audio podcast. I think anything you decide to do will be well received by people if you take it even remotely seriously.
Yeah, I think, and that's the one that I'm guilty of definitely consuming as far as media is like, if I use IG more than anything, so if I see anybody starting a live that I'm at all remotely interested in, I'm going to
Yeah.
go check out the live,
Yep.
even if it, you know, a lot of people like to do like dabs and things like that. I'm not really
Yeah,
into.
I'm not into that one, but
I still watch them, and then like the Myco ones, it's just fewer and less between as far as
yeah,
like people doing lives. And a lot of times it's you know, people doing like the giveaways, or like they're doing the
right,
raffles, or
right.
it's not specifically work.
Yeah, I think just the chit chatting, chopping it up, talking about whatever, you know, you don't got to do them every week. But even if you were just doing them somewhat intermittently, I think people would love that. I wish more people would be doing more of that stuff. All right, dude. Thanks again.
All right, thanks for having me on.
All right, see you, dude.
Bye.
All right, guys, that was Tim of Tip of the Cap Mushrooms. You know, check him out. If you guys aren't already familiar, if you don't pour your own agar, if you're in a pinch and you just need some plates and you don't want to fuss around, check him out at agarnow.com, or on his Etsy. You just search Tip of the Cap Agar. You'll find him. You'll find him. A lot of knowledge, man. I learned a lot of stuff. I wanted to make sure he tooted his horn about a few things, and I think we did all that. And really excited to have him and Dan working together now. I think they're a real asset to the community. I, on a regular basis, use you know, some of his products as well. So anyway, it was just great to have him on and get a little more insight into his journey. Yeah, it's, you know, lot of interesting characters out here, right? A lot of people putting in the work. Man, I recently went to Michigan. I stopped by Tip of the Cap a couple times on the way, you know, to Western Michigan and then back. And Tim's working, man. He's working till all hours of the night sometimes. He's just pouring plates for people because you know, some people can't or don't want to pour their own plates. So he's providing that service. And I think that's really important. Anybody that's looking to do this above and beyond just for themselves, who maybe want to figure out how they can generate a couple bucks, you know, can definitely take a page from him. He really took it seriously, did everything right. He's a man of his word. You're not going to find anybody that said, "Oh, I'll never deal with Tim again. He's, you know, corrupt." And it's just not, that's not him. He's star seller on Etsy. He delivers. He cares about what he's doing. I love seeing vendors like that. Anyway, so for all you newbies, you know, pay attention to the people who just seem like they're doing it right. Don't make cost your first priority. Because if, I mean, man, if you've ever like hired a contractor for some work, the cheapest bid, that's going to be the garbage bid, man. That's not the crew you want doing the work. Couple more bucks. Couple more bucks. You're supporting somebody that takes it seriously. They're not going to have a little post up on Instagram next week that says, "Sorry guys, my girlfriend broke up with me. Orders are late," or "Sorry I'm this, sorry I'm that." They just get shit done. And I appreciate that. If you guys don't care about that, order from whoever you want. But I'm 100% all about character and you know, doing the right thing and all that kind of stuff. So he definitely exemplifies that for sure. Anyway, so like I said, next week we're going to check in with Lauren Ferenga of Hippie and a Vet. We're going to find out how her trip to DC went. We're going to chop it up a little bit, you know, just chit chat and see how she's doing. And guest for next week to be determined. It's going to be one of about 3 people I got slotted in. So it's pretty much whoever I get in the can first, that's who we're getting. One of these days I'm going to get ahead of schedule. That would be great. But the summertime's a little rough. Got the kids home all the time, and we've been doing a lot of traveling and stuff like that. So doing the best I can. Anyway, thank you so much, guys. Happy mushroom cultivation. We will see you next week.